Chapter 1079. Awe. Yu Qianqiu was completely dumbfounded. In his heart, he lamented that the ancients did not deceive him. As expected, as long as one had a skill, one would not be afraid of traveling the world. However, he knew his own capabilities the best. What kind of *T talent did he have? It was enough for him to fool around. If he dared to take it seriously, he would be courting death. Moreover, he had never planned to become an actress. He was afraid that he would be caught in the unspoken rules. Thus, he waved his hand and said, "No need, you don't have to reject me so early." "Think about it carefully before you give me an answer," Qingyang said seriously. "There's really no need." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand again to reject her. He leaned against the pillar behind him and smiled bitterly. "Your evaluation is too high. I really don't have the talent that you said. Moreover, to be honest, I don't like this line of work at all. If I'm not interested in something, how can I do well in the future? I appreciate your kindness." At this point, what else could Qingyang say? She wasn't the kind of person who liked to force others. She could only shake her head and sigh in regret. After silently looking at Yu Qianqiu for a while, she suddenly raised her hand and untied the light gauze on her upper body. Under the dumbfounded gaze of Yu Qianqiu, she took off her upper body. The light gauze fell to the ground, and only a green undergarment was left on her upper body. Her pair of white and tender arms were long and slender. Her shoulders and collarbones were moving up and down gently. That slender and soft waist that belonged to a dancer was glowing with a healthy luster. It was a different kind of charm. F***ck. It can't be. Yu Qianqiu's eyes almost popped out. He was completely speechless. He thought to himself, "You don't have to use dirty tricks just because you think I have talent. You don't have to use dirty tricks to get me into your line of work. Although I like it, I will definitely reject it." Qingyang, on the other hand, had a calm expression on her face. She approached Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting motionlessly. She stretched out her slender and beautiful arm, and made an inviting gesture. "Inviting me to do this in front of everyone's eyes." Yu Qianqiu glanced around and found that everyone's expression seemed to be very used to it. The muscles on his face couldn't help but violently tremble. He immediately determined that this green pear palace was a den of lust. He awkwardly smiled and refused, "I really appreciate your kindness, but I don't have the habit of doing that in front of everyone's eyes." "Forget it." The meaning behind his words seemed to be that he could consider it when there was no one behind him. Qingyang immediately knew that he misunderstood. She glared at him and said, "What you said. Actually, when teaching a layman like you to dance, the less clothes you wear, the better. This way, it will be easier to see if the lines of your body are natural and soft when you dance, and you can correct your mistakes or stiff postures in time, speeding up the progress of your practice." "Qingyang." Yu Qianqiu said, "Then why?" Qingyang was speechless. She explained helplessly, "Don't worry. I don't want to take advantage of you. When a man and a woman dance together, it is easier to reach the realm of body and mind. If it weren't for the fact that I don't have much time left, I wouldn't practice with him like this." "Really?" Yu Qianqiu still didn't believe it. Qingyang, who had always been serious, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Look at his timid and reserved appearance. Why did it seem like she wanted to do something to him? "Do I look so scary?" She bit her lips and glared at him. "Of course it's true. I am a woman, but I am not afraid. You are a man. What are you afraid of?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the expressions of the people around him. He felt that what she said was true. He scratched his head awkwardly and said, "I am not afraid. I am just not used to it and feel shy, you." Qingyang was annoyed and amused. She stretched out her hand again and made an inviting gesture. hurry up. I don't have time to waste with you. Hee hee. Okay. Then I won't be polite. Yu Qianqiu laughed and grabbed her hand. He stood up. Because he was sitting on the ground, he let go of her hand and patted the dust off his butt. Such an action that seemed like that of an old farmer in the mortal world caused Qing Nyang's brows to furrow. To an extraordinary dancer like her, she really wasn't interested in such vulgar behavior. Moreover, she was going to have to dance with such a vulgar person. She forcefully suppressed her displeasure and reached out to take off Yu Qianqiu's clothes. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He crossed his arms to protect his chest. However, he quickly reacted and said awkwardly, "I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself." Thus, under Qingyang's angry gaze, he finally took off his shirt, leaving behind only a tight-fitting white undershirt. After that, he remained indifferent. "Take off your clothes," Qingyang said sternly. Yu Qianqiu looked at his own body. He looked at her half-naked upper body and the undershirt. He couldn't help but mutter, "You are not even going to take off your clothes. Why do you want me to take off my clothes? You." Qingyang was exasperated, but the professionalism displayed by her subsequent actions caused Yu Qianqiu to panic. She turned her hand and was about to pull the knot of her dudu. She was really going to strip naked and start working. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a beast. He let out a breath of cold air and quickly reached out to grab her hand. He repeatedly apologized, "My mouth is cheap. I was wrong. If you really took off all your clothes, I would definitely let my imagination run wild and I wouldn't be able to practice well." "That's good. Don't be angry, I'll take it off." A hand swiftly tore off the white inner shirt on his upper body with a "c" sound. Due to his frequent practice of the animal dance, his muscles were not as strong as a bullfrog's. However, they were solid pieces of muscle. It was obvious that he was full of explosive power. The most peculiar part was his skin. After taking off his clothes, his skin had a faint and beautiful luster. It was as if there was some kind of colorful light flowing around his body. It was a very healthy skin color. He didn't know why. However, ever since he started practicing the 5 elemental secret arts, his skin would look better with every element stored in his body. Moreover, his skin would become smoother and smoother. All the beauties who had slept with him were envious. Qingyang's gaze fell on his naked upper body. She couldn't help but stare blankly. She had seen many naked dancers, but she had never seen such healthy skin. Well, it would be more appropriate to say that it looked good. She only lost her mind for a moment. She quickly regained her composure with her professionalism. She turned around and made a hand gesture. A majestic and gentle music immediately started playing. Yu Qianqiu, who had already taken off his shirt, timidly followed behind her. Qingyang suddenly turned around gracefully, her face already filled with an expression of incomparable adoration. She looked at him tenderly, and her jade-like arms stretched out, taking the initiative to hug his neck. This was a serious skin-to-skin contact. The two of them shivered. Yu Qianqiu was not used to this kind of skin-to-skin contact in front of so many people. However, he didn't say anything about it behind their backs. Qingyang, on the other hand, experienced smooth skin for the first time. It was much smoother than her own skin. "Hold my waist tightly. Don't touch me, turn your head towards me, look at me, lower your chin a little, lower it a little more, don't let your eyes wander. Look into my eyes, and look more affectionate." Under Qingyang's careful guidance, Yu Qianqiu was like a block of wood. His hands and feet were big and loose. Not only was he hugging her tightly, but once he loosened his grip, it was like he was throwing something. It was truly a tragic sight to see him throw Qingyang away. Although the people around them didn't see anything on the surface, they all secretly shook their heads. Could this block of wood really be used during the Celestial Emperor's wedding? They were very doubtful. It wasn't just them who were actively preparing for the day of the wedding. In the past month, the Immortal Palace had already sent invitations to all the sects in the celestial realm, big and small, inviting them to the Paradise of Bliss to participate in Jean Tai and Ji Wu's wedding. The entire celestial realm experienced a rare period of peace in this month. No matter which sect wanted to cause trouble for another sect, even the small sects that couldn't protect themselves, they would brazenly use the invitation sent by the Immortal Palace to repel their enemies. If you dare to hit me, then you're stopping me from participating in the Celestial Emperor's wedding. You're going against the Celestial Emperor. For a time, there were almost no fights between sects in the celestial realm. It could be said that this was a rare occurrence. Although everyone knew that it was because of the Immortal Palace's reputation, some people felt strange. Why was it like the calm before the storm? In the blink of an eye, the date of the Celestial Emperor's wedding was approaching. All the sects were preparing to depart for the Paradise of Bliss. The sects that were far away or those with lower cultivation levels and speed had already set off early. No one dared to be careless about this matter. In order to show their respect to the Celestial Emperor, almost all the sects and merchant guilds in the celestial realm decided to have their sect masters personally lead people to congratulate the Celestial Emperor. Such a grand wedding celebration with such a huge influence could be said to be unprecedentedly grand. The entire celestial realm was paying close attention to it. In fact, the influence of the Celestial Emperor's wedding was not only in the celestial realm. In the underworld, some people or forces that had friendly relations with the Celestial Emperor or the Immortal Palace had sent people to congratulate the Celestial Emperor. For a time, the entrance to the underworld and the underworld was unprecedentedly lively. Looking at the people from the underworld holding the underworld passage tokens issued by the Immortal Palace, and the people coming out of the underworld one after another, the guards of the Immortal Palace who were stationed here sighed in their hearts. They sighed that the influence of the Celestial Emperor was indeed extraordinary. It could be seen that even the people of the underworld were stirred up. Because of this, the army of the Dark Underworld also sent a large number of troops to strengthen the defense at the exit of the underworld to prevent people from taking advantage of the opportunity to cause trouble. Just as the army of the Dark Underworld was strictly inspecting the people passing through the two worlds, a white light suddenly appeared in the sky. Its speed was extremely fast, and in a flash, it landed on the ancient inscription tablet that was engraved with 20 large bright red words not far from the exit of the underworld. Everyone was shocked. Whether it was the army of the Dark Underworld guarding this place or the passers-by, they all looked up. They didn't know who was so bold as to act so recklessly at the entrance of the army of the Dark Underworld. It would have been fine if they didn't look, but after seeing the appearance of the person who came, almost everyone was shocked. They saw a man dressed in a white scholarly robe standing at the edge of the ancient inscription tablet with his hands behind his back. He looked at the people entering and exiting the underworld with an indifferent expression. Chapter 1080. In reality, not many people knew who this person was. It could be said that most people didn't know who this person was. They didn't even know what his name was. However, this didn't prevent them from knowing who this person was. That legendary image immediately reminded them of who this person was. Someone in the Dark Nether army that was guarding this place gave an order. Then, they all knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, Emperor of the Underworld." The surrounding people also knelt down and shouted. However, some only bowed slightly to show respect. The scene immediately became a scene of one person being the ruler. "Rise!" A clear voice echoed through the air. When everyone stood up, they only saw a white light shoot into the passageway to the underworld. The white-robed scholar on the tablet had already disappeared. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, then stared at the exit of the underworld in astonishment. At the exit of the underworld on the other side of the immortal world, the white-robed scholar floated out barefoot. There was not a speck of dust under his feet. Standing on the steps of the entrance, he felt the piercing sunlight. He used his hand to block it and slightly raised his head to look at the bright sun in the sky. One of the golden-robed guards on both sides couldn't stand the scholar's careless and arrogant attitude. He immediately shouted angrily, "Someone, show your token." The scholar tilted his head and glanced at him indifferently. Then, he turned into a streak of light and disappeared. The guard who spoke was furious. He was about to send a signal for his men to kill the scholar, but he was stopped by a few of his colleagues. One of them hissed and waved his hand, "You don't want to live anymore. Do you know who he is? He is the supreme ruler of the underworld, the emperor of the underworld." The angry guard was stunned on the spot. Then, a look of relief appeared on his face. If he really angered the emperor of the underworld, even if the emperor of the underworld killed him in front of everyone, he would have died in vain. Even the immortal emperor wouldn't be able to get justice for him. The majestic myriad saints' peak pierced through the clouds, and at the peak of the peak, a group of people walked out from the majestic myriad saints' palace, whispering to each other. When they came out, they turned into streaks of light and disappeared in all directions. These people were the upper echelons of Wangutong. After everyone left, Wanling sneakily sneaked out from behind a stone pillar and ran into the main hall. In the end, she bumped into the Wangutong sect master, Wan Bushing, who had put on a healthy complexion, striding out in large strides. "Unruly girl, why are you in such a hurry?" Wan Bushing glared at her. Wan Ling's eyes lit up as she asked, "Grandpa, where are you going? Aren't you asking the obvious?" "Of course, I'm going to Paradise Wonderland." Wan Bushing was slightly startled as he said this. He looked at her with vigilance and asked, "Why are you asking this?" However, just as he expected, Wan Ling hugged his arm and cheered, "I'll go with Grandpa." "Stop fooling around. The people attending this banquet are probably the sect leaders of the various sects in the immortal world. What are you doing there? There's nothing for you to play with there. What are you doing?" Wan Bushing waved her hand away and shouted, "Go do what you should be doing." "Grandpa, let me explain." Wan Ling anxiously grabbed his arm again and spilled out the reason. "This time, I made a bet with Hidden Dragon Manor's Duke Long Yu's granddaughter, Long Xiaojiu. Whoever can't attend the Immortal Emperor's wedding has to be the other party's maid for a month. Grandpa, can you bear to see Ling Er lose the bet and suffer such humiliation? What's the difference between me and Grandpa being humiliated and Wangutong being humiliated? Moreover, the invitation didn't limit the number of people attending the banquet, so what's wrong with bringing one more person? Can't you just treat it as bringing Ling Er to broaden her horizons? This is an unprecedented grand wedding of the Immortal Emperor. If you miss it, there won't be a next time." "You." Wan Bushing stared at her speechlessly. After a long while, he finally yelled, "Nonsense." At this time, the entire immortal world was in an uproar. Not only did Wangutong's sect master, Wan Bushing, personally come to the immortal emperor's wedding, more than 10,000 sect masters of various sects had prepared their gifts and left their sects, heading towards the immortal realm of bliss from all directions. Even the 12 immortal monarchs under the immortal emperor's command and the 12 immortal prefectures all came to attend the banquet. In the immortal world, no matter where they were, when they saw the light streaking across the sky towards the immortal realm of bliss, they would all sigh and speculate that it must be the people going to attend the banquet. The immortal emperor's wedding. This was definitely an unprecedented grand banquet in the immortal world. The immortal realm of bliss had become the focus of the entire immortal world, causing countless people to exclaim in admiration. In the ghost world, more than 10 immortal cultivators hurried across the sky together. Suddenly, a green light streaked across the night sky, chasing after a group of people. Startled, the group of people hurriedly stood back to back in the sky, ready for battle. The green light stopped in front of everyone, and a green-robed old man with a thin face appeared. He glanced at the group of people indifferently and asked directly, "Where is the exit from the ghost world to the immortal world?" The group of people looked at each other and found that no one could see through this person's cultivation. They were all a little surprised. The person in the lead, who was probably the leader of the group, respectfully cupped his hands towards the green-robed old man and said, "Judging from your appearance, you are not from the ghost world, so you should also be a cultivator from the immortal world. Since you can come to the ghost world from the immortal world, why don't you know the way back? And judging from your cultivation, you are definitely not a nobody in the immortal world. May I ask which sect in the immortal world are you an expert from?" The green-robed old man glanced at him and said slowly, "This old man is Bai Changchun. From the human world. From the human world. Bai Changchun." The person in the lead was stunned and didn't understand what it meant for a moment. But someone beside him was shocked, and he quickly looked up and down at Bai Changchun's appearance. He suddenly exclaimed, "You are the Bai Changchun who challenged the Emperor of the Netherworld?" As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes immediately swept over Bai Changchun, and they found that his appearance was indeed very similar to the Bai Changchun in the rumors. Immediately, all of them were shocked to the point that they couldn't speak. This wasn't a topic that Bai Changchun wanted to talk about at all, so he asked again, "This old man wants to go to the immortal world. Who can show this old man the way?" His tone was already slightly impatient. Everyone was shocked. This madman was famous in the ghost world. He dared to fight the Emperor of the Netherworld, so it was naturally not difficult for him to deal with them. The person in the lead immediately pointed in the direction of his group and said, "Go straight in that direction, and you will see the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld. Once you go out, you will be in the immortal world." But he pretended to look up and down at Bai Changchun. But what? Bai Changchun's cold gaze pressed over like lightning. The person in the lead cupped his hands and said, "Even though the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld is there, it is heavily guarded now. If you don't have a passage token to the netherworld, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to go out. Of course, with your cultivation, it's naturally not a problem to go out by force. But if you alarm a large number of experts from the netherworld or the Emperor of the Netherworld, I presume that's something that you don't want to see happen. Not to mention without a passage token to the netherworld, even if you leave the netherworld, it will be troublesome at the exit of the immortal world. What if you make a commotion and cause the experts of both the immortal world and the netherworld to?" He revealed a smile that was filled with deep meaning, and he seemed to be saying that you ought to know what the consequences would be. The people around him looked at him with slight puzzlement, and they didn't know why he was so long-winded. How good would it be to send this person away as soon as possible? There was no need to cause more trouble. "Oh." Bai Changchun dragged out an "oh," and then he looked ahead and said indifferently, "So what?" That person immediately took out a black token and offered it up with both hands in a fawning manner. "I've long heard of your great name, and I've always admired you. To be able to see your true appearance today is truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes. I have an extra passage token to the netherworld here, and I'm willing to give it to you for free to help you leave the netherworld smoothly to express my admiration for you." With such an action, the people around him were even more confused. Wasn't he deliberately causing trouble for himself? Immediately, someone secretly sent a voice transmission to warn him, "Elder. This person is a wanted criminal by the Dark Netherworld Army. Once your actions are leaked, it will bring great trouble to the sect. Please reconsider. You'd better learn from me." That person quickly replied with a voice transmission, "It's precisely because this person is a wanted criminal by the Dark Netherworld Army that we accidentally exposed his identity. Aren't you afraid that he will kill us to silence us? Think about it, even the 4 great Netherworld generals together aren't a match for him. What can we do to him? This is called showing goodwill on purpose to make him lower his guard. After he leaves, heh heh. Have you forgotten the huge bounty and great benefits offered by the Dark Netherworld Army?" The former immediately came to a sudden realization and secretly flattered, "Elder is indeed wise. Not only can you avert danger, but you can also take advantage of the situation to make a fortune. When you return to the sect, it will definitely be a great merit." Truly brilliant. This junior has learned his lesson. Then I won't stand on ceremony. Bai Changchun raised his hand and took the Netherworld Passage token from the other party's hand. He held it and looked at it repeatedly. Then, he raised his eyebrows and stared at that person, saying indifferently, "Just based on you guys, I wouldn't bother to make a fuss about it. But since you're unaccountably solicitous, you must be hiding evil intentions. Looks like I can't let you guys live." Aw. Everyone was shocked. As long as they weren't fools, they would be able to understand what he meant. That person who was solicitous turned pale with fright and said, What do you want to do? How can you repay kindness with enmity?" However, seeing that Bai Changchun's expression was completely unmoved, he immediately panicked and shouted, "Stop him." Then, he turned around and wanted to run. Humph. A sonorous cold snort rang out. Everyone immediately felt a majestic and enormous pressure pressing down on them from all directions, suppressing them to the point that they couldn't move at all. Bai Changchun didn't want to waste any more time with them. He casually waved his green robe sleeve, and a mysterious force that seemed to be contained in the heavenly barrier wrapped around the people who were suppressed to the point that they couldn't move. In an instant, more than 10 people were torn into pieces of flesh and blood. Not even a single bone was left intact. The group of people didn't even have time to scream before they lost their lives. Amidst the rain of blood, Bai Changchun didn't take another look. He waved his sleeve and transformed into a stream of light that rapidly went far away. Chapter 1081. Tomorrow is the wedding day of the Immortal Emperor. The entire immortal world is celebrating. I wonder what kind of grand occasion the Paradise Immortal Realm will be. Unfortunately, with our cultivation, we are not qualified to attend the banquet. We can only look forward to it. The closer they got to the exit between the underworld and the immortal world, the more envious words they heard. Bai Changchun, who was flying past these people, frowned and muttered to himself, "Tomorrow." A meditation cultivator wearing a large red shawl suddenly felt something rushing at him at high speed. Just as he reacted, he felt a strong gust of wind, causing him to spin several times in the air. When he calmed down, he found that the shawl he was wearing had disappeared. It was obvious that it had been snatched by someone passing by. This meditation cultivator was about to shout who dared to snatch his things, but after seeing the flash of light, he immediately shut his mouth. Judging from the speed of the other party, he could tell that the other party's cultivation was far higher than his. If he really called the other party back, he was afraid that at that time, it would not only be snatching the shawl, but also taking his life. However, what made him scratch his head was that his shawl was just an ordinary shawl. Why would such an expert want to snatch such an inconspicuous thing? It didn't matter if he couldn't figure it out. Bai Changchun, who was flying at high speed, suddenly unfolded the blood-red shawl in his hand against the wind. With a "hua" sound, it shook and like a red cloud, he rushed over and wrapped it around his shoulders to cover his green robe. He directly flashed towards the heavily guarded exit of the underworld below. 2 groups of people were verifying the pass tokens at the exit of the underworld in front of him. After Bai Changchun landed, he glanced at the people in front of him and took out the pass token that had been verified. After confirming that it was the same as the one in his hand, he looked straight ahead and walked over with large strides. In fact, with his ability, the guarding dark underworld army in front of him could not stop him at all, but he was not the kind of person who was inflexible to the point of not knowing how to adapt. It was an urgent matter. Knowing that tomorrow was the day of Queen Jin's wedding, it would take some time to get to the Immortal Palace. He didn't want to be entangled by trivial matters on the way, so he dressed up like this. Otherwise, he would have disdained to dress like this. The first 2 groups of people entered the swirling black light in the cave one after another and disappeared. A heavily armored general of the Onyx army stood in the middle of the road and stared at Bai Changchun with an awe-inspiring aura. In the end, he discovered that he could not see through this person's cultivation at all, so he immediately retracted his aura a little. Just as he was about to ask the other party to show him the netherworld token, a black light flashed out from the gap of the person's blood-red cape, and a netherworld token floated in front of him. The general was slightly taken aback by Changchun's arrogant behavior under the heavy pressure of the army of the dark underworld. He looked at Changchun meaningfully, grabbed the token and checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, he returned the token and made way for Changchun. He even extended his hand and made an inviting gesture. Throughout the whole process, Changchun did not need to shout at ordinary people. However, Changchun did not appreciate his kindness. He had already brushed past him and did not even look at him from the beginning to the end. He flashed into the swirling black light in the cave ahead. A red cloud floated out of the fairy realm's exit. After checking the token, Changchun stared at the group of people who had just left and chased after them. In the pure paradise fairyland, inside the crystal palace of the Empress of Immortals, the three people in the courtyard looked at the immortal palace that was looming in the clouds. Does it really have to be like this? Yi Shuajuan asked dejectedly, his head lowered with a depressed look. Lu Yanqing was silent on the side. Brother Yi. You don't have to persuade me anymore. We have no choice. Ji Wu stared angrily at the immortal palace in the sky, gritted her teeth, and said, "Isn't it just marrying her? He can have my body, but not my heart." Yi Shuajuan shook his head in grief and indignation. How stupid is that? Lu Yanqing's expression was touched when she heard the words. Her lips moved slightly, and she stopped for a while. However, she seemed to think of something again. She suppressed the impulse to speak and silently lowered her head and bit her lips. Stupid. Ji Wu sneered and said, "One day, I will make Jin Tai regret his stupid decision today. What he forced on me and what he did to Brother Yi, I will make him pay double. With the identity of the Immortal Empress, I can actually do a lot of things." You. Yi Shuajuan's words stopped at the tip of his tongue. A ray of light shot out from the Immortal Palace and landed outside the Crystal Palace. Nie Shaoqian, the chief of internal affairs of the Immortal Palace, led 8 golden-robed maids in. They then stood in a row and saluted Ji Wu in unison, "Greetings, Immortal Empress." Ji Wu snorted coldly, "How dare Chief Nie come in person? Are you here to urge me or force me?" Nie Shaoqian smiled and said, "It was this old servant's negligence. Those 2 insensible servants have been dealt with by me, and the Immortal Emperor has also reprimanded this old servant." She bowed and said, "This old servant welcomes the Immortal Empress to the Immortal Palace." What's the hurry? It hasn't started yet, right? Ji Wu turned sideways. The Immortal Palace had already sent 2 maids to invite her, but she sent them back. Nie Shaoqian smiled apologetically and said, "When the Immortal Empress arrives at the Immortal Palace, the guards outside the Paradise Fairyland will let in the sect leaders who came to congratulate. Moreover, the Immortal Emperor has ordered that the Immortal Empress will be the mother of the world, so we must dress up well for the Immortal Empress. So, please don't make things difficult for me. I can go too." Could it be that the 2 slaves didn't tell you what I said? Ji Wu asked without turning her head around. Nie Shaoqian looked at Yi Shuajuan and Lu Yanqing. She smiled and saluted again. "The Immortal Emperor has reprimanded me, saying that it is normal for the Immortal Empress to have 2 trusted people around her." She looked at Yi Shuajuan meaningfully and said, "But I have something inappropriate to say. The Immortal Empress also knows the Immortal Emperor's temper. I am afraid that someone around you will do something inappropriate to annoy the Immortal Emperor and implicate the Immortal Empress." The meaning of these words was obvious. There was no doubt that it was a warning to some people not to cause trouble at the Immortal Emperor's wedding celebration. This time, they were facing the world. Whoever made the Immortal Emperor lose face in public would not only be themselves, but Ji Wu would also be unlucky. Yi Shuajuan was furious. "Old woman Nie, what do you mean? Ji Wu turned around and stared at Nie Xiaoqian, asking, "Are you threatening me?" "I dare not." Nie Xiaoqian bowed slightly and turned her head to the people behind her. "Escort the immortal empress and her trusted followers to the immortal palace." Her tone was firm. The 8 maids immediately rushed forward. Ji Wu shouted angrily, "Get out of my way. I can walk by myself." Nie Xiaoqian's eyes turned cold as she flew towards the immortal palace in the sky. She glanced at Yi Shuajuan and Lu Yanqing, who were trembling with fear. She waved her hand and said, "Take them away." She then chased after Ji Wu. Yi Shuajuan and Lu Yanqing were immediately restrained by the 8 maids and forced to return to the immortal palace. In the wilderness outside the mountains of Paradise Wonderland, there were many people. The leaders of various sects in the immortal realm had gathered here. They had been waiting for a long time. Seeing that the 12 immortal monarchs had swaggered in, but no one was allowed to enter after a long time, some people were slightly unhappy, but they dared not express their anger. The group of people who were qualified to stand in the front row were naturally the leaders of the big sects in the immortal realm. The Heartless Palace's sect master, Wang Qing, who was dressed in a blue robe and had long, unrestrained hair, was wearing a silver mask. He naturally stood in the front row with his hands folded over his abdomen. He stood there as straight as a pencil without saying a word. The leader of Wangu Tong, Wan Boxing, who sat at the top of the Chamber of Commerce, stood on the left of Wang Qing. Behind him was Wan Ling, who appeared at the wrong time. On the left of Wan Boxing was the leader of the Hidden Dragon Manor, Long Xing, who sat at the second position in the Chamber of Commerce. Behind him was a woman who appeared at the wrong time, Long Xiaojiu. Thus, the two rivals in love stood side by side. It was rare that Long Xiaojiu did not attack each other. It took Long Xiaojiu more effort to come this time than Wan Ling. If Long Xing did not know that this girl's bet implicated the face of the Hidden Dragon Manor, he would not have brought her. However, the price Long Xiaojiu had to pay was heavy. After the bet, she would be detained and reflect on her mistakes for 10 years. However, Long Xiaojiu naturally would not tell Wan Ling about this embarrassing matter. At this moment, the two girls were squeezed in the middle of a group of experts and were as obedient as two little quails. However, they could not help but secretly size up the mysterious man in the silver mask in the front row. The two girls had heard of this extremely cruel and terrifying person who killed his wife and son, but they could not help but want to see his true face under the mask. Dang! A clear and melodious sound of a bell reverberated endlessly between heaven and earth. A rainbow bridge that was 100 meters wide hung directly in front of everyone from afar. It was extremely magical. Countless golden-robed guards flew over in a densely packed manner. One after another, they stood on both sides of the rainbow bridge. Every 100 meters, there would be a pair of guards facing each other. A golden flowing light quickly flew over along the rainbow bridge. Wu Xiong appeared at the head of the bridge and laughed heartily. He cupped his hands and said, "Please forgive me for neglecting you esteemed guests. On behalf of the Immortal Palace, I respectfully welcome the esteemed guests outside the mountain gate. Everyone, please follow along the rainbow bridge. Inside, we have already prepared bejeweled wine for you. Please." He made a welcoming gesture and then flashed to the side to greet them with cupped fists. Wang Qing was the first to turn into a stream of light and fly along the rainbow bridge. The people behind him followed one after another. However, the people behind him seemed to be much more polite than Wang Qing. When they passed by Wu Xiong, they would slightly slow down and return the greeting with cupped fists. Only then did they quickly follow the rainbow bridge into the distance. The golden-robed guards on both sides of the rainbow bridge all made a welcoming gesture with cupped fists and stood there motionlessly. After the rainbow bridge went deep into the Paradise Immortal Realm, it suddenly split from the center. Half of it extended towards the Immortal Palace in the sky, and the other half suddenly extended towards the mountain peak that was cut in half at the waist below the immortal palace. One could see that the huge platform was filled with stone banquets, and there was a faint fragrance of fine wine in the air. Chapter 1082. In the middle of the two rainbow bridges, a line of golden characters appeared, indicating that the sects in the top 1,000 in the immortal world would be seated in the immortal palace in the sky, while the sects below the 1,000 would be seated below. When the sect leaders of the various sects arrived here, they immediately knew who was better and who was worse. Most of them couldn't help but look up at the majestic immortal palace in the distance and felt a little regretful. After all, there weren't many outsiders who could see the true appearance of the immortal palace. If they missed this opportunity, they were afraid that there wouldn't be another chance in the future. However, there were some things that they couldn't control. On the contrary, those sects that were barely ranked in the top 1,000 were a little surprised. In the past, in some occasions, the ranking was often ranked in the top 50 or 100, at most within the top 200. They didn't expect that even these sects that were ranked in the top 1,000 would have the opportunity to enter the immortal palace. From this, it could be seen that the immortal palace was preparing for a grand wedding celebration. For them, to be able to see the true appearance of the immortal palace was also an honor. After going back, they would have the capital to brag about it, so it wouldn't be considered as a wasted trip. However, for the sect leaders of the top sects, many of them had been summoned by the immortal emperor at the immortal palace. Although it was called a summon, it was actually a disguised form of submission. For these proud and arrogant people, the immortal palace represented a period of shame in their lives. Being able to sit in the immortal palace was nothing to be happy about. At the entrance of the Golden World and the Rainbow Bridge, the Grand Commander of the immortal palace, Heli, personally stood on the side to welcome the guests. On the other side, there was a marked place for guests to receive gifts. There was a row of guards helping the immortal emperor to receive the wedding gifts. In the distance, there was a magnificent immortal palace that was glistening with multicolored light, as well as this dazzling and magnificent golden kingdom. This caused those sect leaders who had just arrived to be extremely shocked. Perhaps the sects didn't lack such worldly things like gold, but it was impossible for them to take out so much gold. What was called grandeur? This was the true grandeur of an emperor. Anything that was accumulated to the extreme was enough to shake people's hearts. Under the lead of the immortal palace's guards, the group walked for almost an hour before they reached the bottom of the steps of the majestic immortal palace. Most of them were shocked by the immortal palace's silent sovereign king's aura. From the bottom to the top of the 36th step, there were 6 sets of 12 long golden tables on each side. The tables were already filled with fine wine and delicacies. At the center of the 36th step, there were 2 extremely luxurious dragon and phoenix thrones, and the delicacies on the table were even more sumptuous. The 12 seats below were naturally prepared for the 12 great immortal monarchs. As for the 2 dragon and phoenix thrones in the middle, who would dare to sit on them except for Jin Tai and Ji Wu? On both sides of the stairs, 10 long rows of golden tables were set up. There were a total of 20 rows on both sides, and each row had 50 seats, exactly 1,000 seats. In the middle, there was a 100-meter-wide aisle in the air. Under the guidance of the guards of the immortal palace, they began to take their seats according to the ranking of their sections. The sect leader of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, sat on the first seat on the left side of the steps, while Wang Bushing sat on the first seat opposite of Wang Qing. Long Xing of the Hidden Dragon Villa was right next to Wang Bushing. At this time, nearly 1,000 people couldn't help but look at Wang Bushing and Long Xing because the two of them were too conspicuous. Everyone came alone, but the two of them brought a girl. Moreover, it was the pair of clowns who were notorious for fighting for a man's affections in the immortal world. Why did it feel like they were making a scene? Some people who had a good relationship with the two of them secretly sent messages to them, admiring them. "You two old guys really have guts." The faces of the Xing and the Xing were slightly dark, and they happened to be leaning against each other, so it was impossible for them not to be conspicuous. Even Wang Qing, who was sitting opposite of them, couldn't help but look at the two old guys. In fact, they did not expect that the Immortal Palace would have such a clear seating arrangement. They had thought that it would be fine to let the two juniors mingle with the crowd of tens of thousands of sects to attend the banquet. Who would have thought that when they arrived in front of the Immortal Palace, there would be more than 9,000 sects divided according to their sects? And the remaining 1,000 people were assigned one position for each sect. Now, there would be something to see. The two old guys were full of regret. If they had known this earlier, they would have asked Wu Xiong when they were outside the Paradise Immortal Realm. After knowing the situation, they would immediately ask the two girls to leave. Now, it was hard to get off the tiger. Fortunately, the Immortal Palace was not stingy. The length of the long golden table was enough to accommodate two people, and the guards of the Immortal Palace didn't express any doubts about the two extra girls. However, the two girls were cramped and didn't dare to raise their heads. Under the pressure of the Immortal Palace, they realized how small they were and that they had caused trouble. Their intestines were green with regret. The two girls' ears were filled with the angry voices of the two sect leaders who had nowhere to vent their anger. Their heads were so low that they almost hit the table. In the magnificent imperial garden of the Immortal Palace, a white-robed scholar strolled barefoot with his hands clasped behind his back on a small path in the garden. He looked at the garden that was filled with all kinds of flowers, trees, and pavilions that were carved out of gold. Everywhere was golden and dazzling. As he wandered, he saw Jean Tai, who was walking from the front palace to the back palace. He immediately walked to the middle of the road and blocked Jean Tai's way. Jean Tai's slender eyes shone brightly, and he said in a deep voice, "I'm warning you, don't make trouble at this time. I'm here to congratulate you on your wedding." "Why would I come to make trouble?" Bai Qi said with a smile and reached out to touch the golden robe embroidered with dragons and clouds. Jean Tai unceremoniously waved his hand to block the other's demonic claws, and said coldly, "Are you so kind? Have I been blind for so many years?" "Humph. It's more likely that the sun has risen in the underworld. You don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. If you don't believe me, I can't do anything." "Oh right." Bai Qi waved his hand and pointed at everything around him that was shining with gold, and said, "Other people's imperial garden is full of exotic flowers and plants. You have nothing but gold here. I'm giving you face by saying you're vulgar. Will your bride be able to endure your perverted fetish? Ji Wu, that girl, is a rare beauty in the world. Aren't you afraid that you'll ruin her on your golden bed?" "Bai Qi. This is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Get out of my way." Jean Tai shouted in a deep voice. Bai Qi chuckled and got out of the way. After watching Jean Tai's figure disappear into the harem, he crossed his arms and mumbled to himself with an annoyed expression, "That boy with a messy fate was chosen by Jean Tai to sing." In the vast golden square below the Immortal Palace, countless golden-robed guards suddenly appeared from all directions. They lined up neatly and stood there motionlessly, almost filling the entire square. It gave the sect leaders of the various sects a great deal of pressure, as if they were surrounded. Just as the heads of the various sects were looking around, a burst of heavenly music suddenly rang out in the entire square, stirring everyone's hearts. A group of men and women wearing light muslin or with vigorous bodies landed on the 100-meter-wide passageway in the middle. As soon as they landed, they immediately danced to the fluttering heavenly music, displaying their enchanting dance postures. It was very pleasing to the eye, and the atmosphere of the entire square immediately relaxed. Suddenly, everyone raised their heads to look at the 100-meter-high steps. They saw that the mighty 12 immortal monarchs had split into 2 rows and walked down from the high steps. When they were stationed in one area, they all wore different clothes, but now, they all wore the golden woven clothes of the Immortal Palace. The 12 immortal monarchs walked down step by step, directly facing the crowd below and sat down in their seats. Then, a large group of golden-robed men appeared on the top of the 100-meter-high steps. As the two groups of people split into two groups and walked down the steps in an orderly manner, the sect leaders of the various sects immediately gasped. These people were the palace lords of the 3,600 mountains in the pure paradise immortal realm. There were over 3,000 of them, and the weakest of them was at the early immortal emperor realm. They all listened to the orders of the immortal emperor, and they were the central force of the immortal palace that truly deterred the entire immortal realm. For example, the positions of the 12 immortal monarchs and immortal palace commanders and protectors were mostly vacant, and most of them were selected from among these people. In just a short while, more than 3,000 experts had separated along the stairs and stood on both sides of the stairs. The sect leaders below all felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by these people. However, before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. The 24 protectors of the immortal palace were split into two rows, each with 12 people walking down the steps. Finally, they stood on both sides of the steps that corresponded to the number of steps. That was not all. At the top of the steps, 6 people stood side by side. After a short pause, they walked down in unison. These 6 people were the 6 great commanders of the immortal palace. Wu Xiong and Deming Luan, who led the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, were among them. The 6 of them walked until they were 18 steps away from the 12 immortal monarchs and stopped. Everyone looked at the top of the steps again. The figure of Nie Xiaoqian, the chief steward of internal affairs of the immortal palace, stood alone. After glancing down coldly, she said in a clear voice, "The immortal emperor and the immortal empress have arrived." Her voice resounded through the entire immortal palace. The 12 immortal monarchs on the 36 steps suddenly stood up and turned around. The 6 great commanders on the 48th step turned around. The 24 protectors on both sides of the steps turned around. The more than 3,000 palace lords of the paradise of bliss on each side of the 36th step turned around. Countless immortal palace guards all over the square turned around. Everyone looked at the chief steward of internal affairs, Nie Xiaoqian, who was on the steps. Under such an imposing manner, thousands of sect leaders stood up subconsciously. Wang Qing, who was in the seat of honor, paused for a moment, but still stood up. At the center of everyone's attention, a man and a woman in dragon and phoenix golden robes appeared on the left and right of the chief steward of internal affairs. They looked down with incomparable dignity. Nie Xiaoqian did not dare to stand side by side with the two of them. She walked down 3 steps in a row. After lowering her head, she glanced at the people below and said, "Welcome, immortal emperor and immortal empress." Chapter 1083. The ethereal celestial music had long since stopped, and the dancing men and women all stood with their hands clasped behind their backs. Nie Xiaoqian quickly walked to the side and knelt to the men and women high above. She respectfully and loudly shouted, "Your subjects congratulate immortal emperor and immortal empress on your wedding." She was the first to congratulate them, and the others just had to follow suit. However, to the thousands of sect leaders of the various sects, it was somewhat difficult for them to accept the words, "Your Majesty." Once they said it while kneeling, it was undoubtedly a sign that they were kneeling and bowing to the sect leader, completely submitting to him. However, before they could think too much about it, the palace lords of the 3,600 mountains of the immortal realm of bliss on both sides of the platform had already knelt down on one knee in front of the lofty men and women. The 24 protectors had already knelt down on one knee, the 6 commanders had knelt down on one knee, the 12 immortal monarchs had also knelt down on one knee. Under such tremendous pressure, many of the 1,000 sect leaders couldn't bear it any longer. Their knees buckled and they finally knelt. With someone taking the lead, the pressure was even greater for the others. Like a stone that set off 1,000 ripples, almost all of them knelt down one after the other. Although the few sect leaders who were ranked at the very top of the rankings had gloomy expressions on their faces, they had no choice but to slowly knelt down on one knee. Wang Qing stood straight and slowly swept his gaze across the countless experts of the immortal palace on either side of the stairs. Finally, his gaze met the cold and aloof gaze of the man high above. His eyes flickered, and he slowly knelt down as well. Directly below the floating immortal palace, there was a large mirror projection projected by some kind of magic treasure, projecting everything that was happening in the golden world above everyone's heads. Even the voices that were being spoken could be heard clearly. Nearly 10,000 sect leaders of the immortal world all knelt down under the pressure. Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding. Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding. Tens of thousands of people in the sky and on the ground shouted the same words in unison, and their voices echoed between heaven and earth for a long time. The momentum of unifying the world was concentrated on one person, and the woman beside him was the one who shared it. Jin Tai seemed to enjoy the feeling of having tens of thousands of people submit to him. He swept his gaze over the crowd for a long time before glancing at Ji Wu beside him. Today, Ji Wu was very beautiful. She was wearing a dazzlingly gorgeous golden robe that accentuated her beautiful figure and exuded an indescribably noble aura. Her beauty was rare in the world. Her exquisite golden phoenix coronet was lifelike like a peacock spreading its tail. Her well-groomed eyebrows were like a phoenix spreading its wings. Her cold eyes stared straight ahead. Coupled with the serious indifference on her beautiful face, she had the aura of a motherly model of the world. If not me, who else could it be? Even Jin Tai, who was used to seeing beautiful women, was somewhat unwilling to move his eyes away from her face. He sighed in his heart that he really did not choose the wrong person. Only she was worthy to be his immortal empress, to share the world with him and be worshipped by tens of thousands of people. Jin Tai's gaze swept across the crowd once again, and finally landed on Nie Xiaoqian, who was kneeling on the ground, and nodded slightly. Nie Xiaoqian quickly stood up and respectfully led the way for the immortal world's dragon and phoenix supremacy. A man and a woman slowly walked down the stairs. With every step they took, the golden phoenix coronet on Ji Wu's head would shake slightly, like a phoenix nodding its head, signaling to the tens of thousands of people who were worshipping it. Behind her, a golden phoenix tail skirt slid down the steps. At this time, everyone noticed that there was a man and a woman behind the two of them. Yi Shuejuan's black-silver robe had been replaced by a golden robe. His silver hair fell to his shoulders, and his face was tense and silent. He silently followed behind Ji Wu on the right. It looked like he was not attending a wedding, but a funeral. Lu Yanqing also changed into a woman's golden dress and followed behind Jin Tai on the left. Her eyes were a bit dazed as she looked down. Not even in her wildest dreams did she think that she would come to the immortal palace one day. Moreover, she was standing behind immortal Emperor Jin Tai, looking down on all the heroes in the world. This feeling made her a bit dazzled. This feeling made her understand why so many women would disregard everything to pursue certain things, and why so many men would fight and kill each other for power. So this was the feeling of standing at the peak of power. Everything was under your feet. Among the kneeling crowd, many women showed envious eyes as they looked at Ji Wu, who was slowly accompanying Jin Tai. Wan Ling and Long Xiaozhou were no exception. At this moment, Ji Wu really dazzled them. Beautiful. Noble. Accepting the worship of the world. If only they were the ones standing in that position. It was an irresistible fantasy for women. What surprised the two of them the most was that they actually saw Lu Yanqing standing behind Jin Tai, receiving the worship of the crowd. This made the two secretly look at each other because they already knew Lu Yanqing when they were in the World Commerce Association. Many men's eyes were on Yi Shuejun. They didn't expect the deposed immortal crocodile to appear in public again. Some of the 12 immortal monarchs kneeling on the steps had ugly expressions. In the magnificent immortal palace, a white-robed scholar slowly paced in front of the window sill of the top floor, looking indifferently at the scene below. Suddenly, he sneered, shook his head slightly, and said to himself, "This guy just likes to put on this kind of scene. Who doesn't know that you are immortal Emperor Jean Tai? Why do you have to be so ostentatious? Do you think there are too few people who hate you?" Under Nie Xiaoqian's respectful guidance, the immortal emperor and immortal empress finally sat on the dragon and phoenix thrones in the center of the steps. Yi Shuijun and Lu Yanqing silently stood on either side of the thrones. Jean Tai calmly sat on his throne, glanced at Ji Wu, who was sitting beside him with an expressionless face, and said with a dignified aura, "You may all rise." His tone was indifferent, but it clearly drilled into everyone's ears. It was completely the tone of an emperor. "Thank you, immortal emperor." Cheers reverberated in the sky and earth. Everyone stood up and returned to their positions. After kneeling for such a long time, although nothing could be seen on the surface, none of them felt comfortable in their hearts. "Wang Qing. I didn't expect your cultivation to have reached the late immortal emperor stage. Your progress is amazing." Jean Tai suddenly stared at Wang Qing and said lightly. Everyone heard this and stared at Jean Tai. Many people were a little surprised. In fact, some people with cultivation at Wang Bushing's level had already seen that Wang Qing's cultivation had broken through the intermediate immortal emperor stage. Before this, they were still wondering if they could get past Jean Tai. They didn't expect that Jean Tai would directly say it before the wedding ceremony. Some sect leaders who were also intermediate immortal emperors couldn't help exchanging glances with each other. They felt sorry for Wang Qing in their hearts. Could it be that Jean Tai was so intolerant that he wanted to act up during his own wedding ceremony? Wang Qing, who was about to sit down, slowly stood up again. His silver mask was very eye-catching in this golden world. He had already prepared for the worst before coming, so he calmly clasped his hands at Jean Tai and said, "Thank you for your praise, immortal emperor. I can't accept your amazing progress in front of an immortal emperor." Jean Tai's eyes flickered as if he was saying that it's good that you know. He picked up the wine glass on the table and slightly raised it towards Ji Wu, who was beside him. Ji Wu expressionlessly picked up the wine glass on the table as if she was the husband's wife. "Everyone came from far away to congratulate me. I'm very pleased." Jean Tai and Ji Wu raised their cups and said, "Everyone, let's drink this cup." The people seated below all raised their cups and stood up, accompanying these two supreme dragons and phoenixes in toasting a cup of fine wine. Jean Tai then waved his wine cup and said to everyone, "As you wish." Everyone then sat down again. But it seemed that not many people could do so. At this time, Nie Xiaoqian, as the general manager, walked to the dragon and phoenix throne and looked around at everyone. On such a beautiful occasion, the wine are not enough to enjoy to the fullest, let's add to it with song and dance. World Commerce Sect leader Yu Qianqiu was very happy to hear about the wedding of Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress. He spared no effort to travel the immortal and nether realms and painstakingly composed beautiful songs to present to Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress wedding. The Immortal Emperor is grateful for his loyalty and specially issued a decree to let him perform the opening song of the wedding ceremony to reward everyone. After she finished speaking, she retreated to the side, announcing the start of the wedding ceremony. The sect leaders of the various sects who were present all guarded their mountain gates tightly. Almost none of them had seen Yu Qianqiu before. At this moment, they all secretly glanced at each other with a strange expression. They all wanted to see how many eyes and arms Yu Qianqiu, who had caused such a ruckus in the immortal and netherworld, had to actually come here to flatter them. Wang Bushing and Wan Ling looked at each other and did not show anything. Until now, they still regarded Yu Qianqiu as a trusted spy sent by the immortal emperor. They always thought that this was just an act, nothing more than a way for the immortal emperor to show himself. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence that he picked Yu Qianqiu out of everyone else? Immortal Crocodile Lord and Lu Yanqing's expressions were inexplicable, and Ji Wu could not help but frown slightly. The white-robed scholar leaning against the window of the immortal palace couldn't help but turn around and stare at the extraordinary atmosphere below. Who wouldn't be able to contain their joy? Yu Qianqiu, who was temporarily hiding behind the crowd, was very depressed. Once these words spread, he would become a vile person who rushed to flatter the immortal emperor. He rolled his dead fish eyes and looked at Qingyang next to him, as if saying, "Your mother, in order to protect the immortal emperor's authority, she is simply burying me to death." Qingyang glanced at him slightly, as if she had nothing to do with it. Suddenly, the sound of drums resounded from the crowd where the heroes were seated. String music spread out majestically, and the atmosphere of the entire square changed abruptly. In the center of the 100-meter-wide aisle below the steps, the male and female dancers who were standing with their hands behind their back began to dance again. As they danced, a large space in the center was gradually emptied. Chapter 1084. These courtesans did not attract anyone's attention. On the other side of the passageway that faced the immortal emperor and immortal empress, the densely packed golden-robed guards suddenly parted to create a path. Everyone's eyes turned to look at him. A bright red drum embroidered with gold rivets was carried over by a group of bare-chested men. The diameter of the drum was estimated to be 3 to 4 meters wide and 1 meter thick. This was not the most eye-catching thing. The most eye-catching thing was the person standing on top of the drum. A golden-robed man stood on top of it with a majestic aura. Everyone suddenly felt that the golden robe on this person's body gave them a feeling of fear and trepidation. They subconsciously looked at Kim Tai, and then turned their heads to look back. The golden robe of the person standing on the drum was not the golden robe worn by ordinary people from the immortal palace. It was exactly the same as the golden robe worn by Jin Tai. The coiling dragon cloud sea that covered the robe, and the golden crown on this person's head. It could be said that other than the person's appearance, everything else was exactly the same as the immortal Emperor Jin Tai's attire. Wow! The crowd was in an uproar. The heads of the various sects, the people on the steps, and the people standing around were all shocked. They could not believe that there was such an arrogant person who dared to be so arrogant in front of the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Wan Ling and Long Xiaozhou's mouths were wide open. Ji Wu, Yi Shuajuan, and Lu Yanqing were stunned. Bai Qi, who was standing by the window of the immortal palace, almost choked to death. He was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. He muttered to himself, "What is this kid trying to do?" This was the reaction of those who knew Yu Qianqiu. Not bad. The person standing on the drum was none other than Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to be awesome. After a while, everyone gradually calmed down because they found that the immortal Emperor Jin Tai and the chief steward of the immortal palace, Nie Shaoqian, did not seem to be moved by this person's treachery. Everyone came to a realization. It was just a show, but it was scary enough. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the drum and being carried over, pretended to be awe-inspiring as he scanned his surroundings. He asked himself in his heart and realized that even the pretentious actions of his 2 lifetimes combined couldn't compare to this one. Although he found the feeling of looking down on all living things, he couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. With this show, his wisdom in this lifetime could be considered to have been shattered to pieces, and he could never pick it up again. The drums suddenly became rhythmic. Under the accompaniment of the string music, a group of bare-chested men carried Yu Qianqiu on the drum like an emperor inspecting the world. When the drum was carried to the center of the passageway, a gentle and melodious string music permeated the cadence of the drum. Nearly 100 dancers wearing golden gauze clothes descended from the sky, surrounding a gorgeously dressed woman in the middle and blocking the front of the drum. They turned a blind eye to the drum and began to dance in front of it. Their dance was exquisite and elegant, like 100 blooming flowers. Everyone held their breath. Yu Qianqiu raised his foot and stepped on the drum. The drum was placed firmly in the center of the passage by those shirtless men. At the front, there were dancers dancing like flowers. The woman in the middle was dancing to the front of the crowd. When she turned her head, she suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu standing on top of the drum. Her dance came to a halt, and her expression became infatuated, as if she had seen a lover she hadn't seen for a long time. Everyone held their breath and couldn't help but look back at Ji Wu, who was sitting next to the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. This woman's clothes were almost exactly the same as Ji Wu's. The only difference was that her clothes were lighter and more translucent. It was obviously for the convenience of dancing. The majestic Yu Qianqiu on the drum suddenly changed. He looked at the woman in front of him with a gentle gaze. 100 female dancers slowly pushed Ji Wu, who was dressed like Qingyang, towards the drum. At this time, Yu Qianqiu also jumped down from the drum. 100 bare-chested men rushed out from the side of the drum and slowly pushed him towards the other side. Gradually, he, who was wearing the dragon robe, stopped when he was only a step away from her, who was wearing the phoenix coronet. Their eyes met, filled with tenderness and reluctance to part. Ho! 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 The group of bare-chested men slightly swayed their upper bodies and chanted, as if they were encouraging Yu Qianqiu to do something. Under everyone's encouragement, Yu Qianqiu suddenly pulled Qingyang over and carried her by the waist. Then, he turned around and walked towards the drum. The 100 men quickly ran back and used their shoulders to form a human bridge in front of the drum. Yu Qianqiu carried Qingyang and stepped on everyone's shoulders to walk back to the drum. Then, he reluctantly put Qingyang down. The 100 bare-chested men and the 100 women quickly gathered around the drum and danced in pairs. In an instant, the crowd was filled with emotions. The music changed again. The majestic tune became softer. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with tenderness. He gently raised his hand and caressed Qingyang's cheek. Together with the music, he pitifully sang, captivating the fish and alighting the geese, overshadowing the moon and shaming the flowers, so beautiful that there's nowhere to hide. With her by my side, it's like bathing in the spring sunshine. I'd rather die without regrets. Outstanding beauty and heavenly fragrance, let me entangle you, even if life is short. You and I are willing, you and I are together, how fortunate we are to be a pair. The men who were dancing around the drum immediately followed the last note and sang to their partners, how fortunate we are to be a pair. Qingyang's amorous face immediately bloomed with endless shyness. She stepped back gracefully and danced on the surface of the drum. This dance was peerless, this dance was devastatingly beautiful. This dance blossomed with boundless beauty. This dance made the dancers around the drum pale in comparison. Every piece of her clothes fluttering in the wind was filled with love. Every stretch of her jade-like arms was filled with reluctance to part with Yu Qianqiu. Every time her toes danced on the surface of the drum, it was the sound of her lover's heartbeat. The crowd had never heard such an exciting song. No matter what kind of thoughts they had in their hearts before, everyone's emotions were fluctuating with the rhythm of the song. Qingyang's dancing level could be said to be unparalleled in the world. Every time she moved, it was like a mysterious black hole that swallowed everyone's gaze. According to Qingyang's original plan, Yu Qianqiu was supposed to sing and dance with her at the same time. However, no matter how brilliant the technique she taught him was, Yu Qianqiu, that blockhead, could not understand it even if he was beaten to death. Thus, Qingyang could only come up with this plan. She would dance alone, and Yu Qianqiu would only need to cooperate with her a little. However, what she didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu was not a blockhead. At that point, he really did not have the courage to dance in front of the heroes of the world. Thus, he simply could not learn it even if he was beaten to death. The man dancing under the drums suddenly let out a resounding "Hi." Yu Qianqiu, who was silently following Qingyang's dancing footsteps, waved his hand and said, "Ah, wait for me to cup my hands and the mountains to please you." Tens of thousands of people will sing in unison for thousands of years to come. Look at the distant mountains smiling and the flowing waters flowing. For generations to come, the seas will dry up and the rocks will rot away. The domineering drum music suddenly turned gentle, and the 100 or so men joined in with a loud "hi" before hugging their nimble partners. The dancing of hundreds of flowers suddenly stopped, and only Qingniang was left dancing alone on the drum. She attracted everyone's attention, and in reality, everyone's eyes had never left her. Their eyes were already glued to her nimble dance. Yu Qianqiu, who was on the drum, did not lose out either. He reached out and wrapped his arms around Qingniang's soft waist. He looked at her and sang with deep emotion, "Oh, I'm drunk with you today. I can't let go of your beauty. Don't wait until your hair turns white before you regret it. Oh, I'm drunk with you today. I can't let go of your beauty. Let me hug the beauty back." The majestic drum music continued for a long time. Yu Qianqiu hugged Qingniang and looked at her with a faint smile. Qingniang's eyes were as soft as water, and her jade-like arms were already wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's neck. She buried her head in his shoulder, unwilling to part with him. The music was beautiful, and the dance was even more beautiful. The two's teamwork could be said to bring out the best in each other, and everyone was deeply immersed in it. No one knew who was the first to shout out and clap their hands in praise. Good. In that instant, the thunderous applause pulled everyone back to reality. Jean Tai, who was sitting high up on the steps, was someone who rarely smiled. However, he couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face this time. He nodded his head slightly to express his praise, and turned his head to look at Ji Wu. Ji Wu's eyes were filled with anger. She wasn't an idiot, and she knew that this song was obviously meant to flatter Jean Tai. It was meant to glorify the love between her and Jean Tai. If it was true, then it wouldn't matter. However, the two of them seemed to be united on the surface, but at heart, they were divided. However, when she suppressed the anger in her heart, she couldn't help but bite her lips. She stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was still pretending to hug Qingniang, with a complicated expression on her face. There was one thing that even she couldn't deny. If this song was not meant to flatter, it was indeed a song that moved her heart. It was a pity that the male protagonist described in the song was not the person she liked. Such talent was used to flatter. Ji Wu was a little angry. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have encouraged Jean Tai to let Yu Qianqiu compose the song. At the same time, she had already decided to let Yu Qianqiu flatter her to his heart's content after this. Behind her, Yi Shuejun was also unhappy. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a livid face. On the other side, Lu Yanqing's face was full of bitterness. Long Xiaojiu and Wan Ling, who were below the stage, were shocked. After coming to their senses, they kept staring at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Bai Qi, who was on the window of the Immortal Palace, shook his head repeatedly. Now everyone finally understood that the Immortal Emperor's decree to let Yu Qianqiu compose the song was not a whim. It meant that Yu Qianqiu really did have something up his sleeves. Just as the rhythm of the drum changed again, Yu Qianqiu sent Qingniang away and sang half a line of "captivating the birds and alighting the geese." The expressions of all the experts present suddenly changed, and they turned their heads to look into the distance. 6 of the 24 protectors on the stage had already flashed away in an instant. They turned into streams of light and shot in the same direction. Boom! There was an explosion in the distance, and Yu Qianqiu's throat shrank. He could no longer sing. Chapter 1085. After a moment of chaos, the drumming also stopped. Yu Qianqiu, who was disguised as Jean Tai, and Qingniang, who was disguised as Ji Wu, both stopped. The two of them, who were standing on top of the drum, turned their heads to look in the direction of the explosion in astonishment. The two of them were wearing eye-catching outfits, and they were truly a perfect couple. At this time, head steward Nie Xiaoqian, who was standing on the steps, was distracted for some reason. She looked at the two people on the big drum, and her eyes were not as cold as the head steward's, but more motherly love. Even the explosion in the distance didn't wake her up immediately. It wasn't until the man and woman stopped their performance that she suddenly woke up. How dare you trespass into the blissful immortal realm, die! A series of shouts came from afar, followed by a series of explosions. You overestimate yourself. A cold snort sounded. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed. This voice was so familiar, it couldn't be. After the cold snort, a series of miserable screams rang out. The clouds in the distance changed drastically. The faces of the people of the immortal palace on the stand changed. The heads of the various sects looked at each other. The situation was very clear. Someone was trespassing into the blissful immortal realm, but they didn't know who it was. How dare they? Ji Wu, who was sitting on the phoenix seat, slightly tilted her head to look at the man beside her. The majestic Jin Tai's expression didn't change, but under his slender eyelids, his eyes were as cold as a knife. Chief Steward Nie Xiaoqian, who was standing below, immediately understood what was going on and said in a clear voice, "Since there are honored guests here to support the wedding of the Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress, why don't you all leave now? There's no need to stop them, let the honored guests come here." The shocking sound in the distance suddenly stopped. It was unknown how many people participated in the killing of the intruder, but judging from the sound, there must be a lot of people. A stream of light quickly shot over. Before the people could see the appearance of the intruder clearly, a red cloud had already left the hand of the intruder. Wind and thunder surged, and it quickly attacked the singing and dancing place below. The two people standing on the drum were shocked. Qingyang was an early-stage immortal emperor. She reacted quickly and grabbed Yu Qianqiu. The two of them quickly hid among the guards. Boom! Jin Ju transmitted his voice. The ground shook, and the drum was instantly blasted into pieces by the red cloud. Of the 200 or so dancers, those with high cultivation quickly dodged, while those with low cultivation suffered on the spot. The ground was a pool of blood, and in the midst of wailing, dozens of kabuki fell to the ground, twitching. However, this destructive power alone was not enough to cause any harm to the sect masters sitting on the two sides of the passageway. A mere stellar energy was enough to withstand the residual power of the explosion. Under the pressure of the gang qi, a large number of things fell from the two sides of the front row near the passage. There were fragments from the explosion of the drum and pieces of red cloth fluttering to the ground. Even though the power of the explosion was not great, the shock in everyone's hearts was indescribable. Someone dared to attack in front of Immortal Emperor Jin Tai in the Immortal Palace. Moreover, what day was this? The Immortal Emperor's wedding. Who dared to forcefully interrupt the Immortal Emperor's wedding? Who was this arrogant to such an extent? Was he not afraid of death? Everyone slowly raised their heads to look at the sky in indescribable shock. On the vast golden plaza, on the left and right sides of the Immortal Palace, there were two towering golden pillars that were tens of meters in diameter. The newcomer stood with his hands behind his back at the top of the towering golden mountain on the right. His skinny body was covered in a green robe. As the wind blew, the hem of the green robe fluttered in the wind. His eyes were bright and full of expression as he calmly scanned the area below. His gaze swept past Yu Qianqiu without stopping. He ignored everyone else and directly stared at the extremely eye-catching man sitting high up on the steps. Jin Tai only glanced at him indifferently. Then, he leisurely closed his eyes. Light flickered in and out of his eyes. It was as if he did not care about the newcomer at all. His temperament was as steady as a mountain. As expected of the Immortal Emperor who had ruled the immortal world for so many years, he never lost the aura of an emperor. Sure enough, it was him, Yu Qianqiu, who was dragged into the crowd by Qingyang, looked at the person standing on the top of the immortal palace. The expression on his face was very interesting. He did not expect this person to come. He couldn't help but bitterly smile in his heart. Others might not know why the old man broke the drum as soon as he arrived, but how could he not know? With the old man's arrogance, it was obvious that he felt ashamed of his disciples' actions. But he didn't know if the old man came for him or if he knew that there was a show here and wanted to fight. Yu Qianzhou then looked around worriedly, especially at the large number of experts standing on the steps. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart again. The old man's style of doing things really couldn't be judged by ordinary people's thinking. He was too straightforward. Another dazzling appearance. In his dictionary, the word low-key didn't seem to exist. The person who came was his master, Bai Changchun. The originally leisurely white-robed scholar in front of the window of the immortal palace froze when he saw the person who came. His eyes immediately narrowed. Bai Qi didn't expect Bai Changchun to still be alive. He didn't expect Bai Changchun to be able to come out alive after being seriously injured by him and escaping into the forbidden area of the underworld. What's more, he didn't expect Bai Changchun to appear in front of him in this kind of situation. After carefully looking at the other party, he found that the other party's cultivation had already risen to the late immortal emperor stage. Bai Qi's pupils shrank and he coldly snorted in his heart. This person's cultivation had improved so quickly and he also had a grudge against him. This person couldn't be left alive. Emperor of the underworld Bai Qi's killing intent had already been ignited, and a faint killing intent had already gathered in his eyes. Lu Yanqing was naturally not unfamiliar with Bai Changchun. She thought that she had seen wrongly. Why would Bai Changchun appear in this place at this time? However, whether it was his appearance or demeanor, he was undoubtedly that person. Regardless of whether it was his bearing or demeanor, he did not lose the slightest bit of his former self. He was like a blade that had been unsheathed. The more he sharpened it, the sharper it became. He still did not hide his sharpness at all. Looking at Bai Changchun, who was at the peak of Huabiao, and now they met here, Lu Yanqing couldn't help but feel a lot of emotions, from the world's #1 expert who deterred the world, to the underworld royal palace in the underworld to challenge the emperor of the underworld, and now to the immortal emperor's wedding ceremony, where many experts gathered. This person's life was really amazing even for a woman like her. It was always so magnificent. He was like a raging great river, and no matter how strong the obstacles were, he would rather have the torrential waves overflow to the heavens, and he would continue to roll forward, break through everything, and never stop. In the end, he would rush to the sea that belonged to him, and no one could stop him. He was here. What would he do now that he was here? The haze on Air Shuajuan's face instantly dispersed, and his eyes bloomed with an inexplicable light of surprise, as if he saw the hope of breaking out of this hopeless situation. As soon as he turned around, he met Ji Wu's astonished gaze, and they both looked very surprised. Exujun, Ji Wu, and Lu Yanqing all turned to look at Yu Qianzhou, who was well-dressed and dressed like a dog. All three of them knew that Bai Changchun and Yu Qianzhou were master and disciple, and they all wondered if Bai Changchun's arrival had anything to do with Yu Qianzhou. Everyone present looked at immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who was sitting on the throne. Not only did someone disrupt the wedding ceremony, but he also killed the people of the immortal palace in front of him. This was tantamount to publicly slapping Jin Tai in the face. However, this person dared to make such a ruckus and come all the way here. Naturally, his ability was not to be underestimated. They didn't know how immortal Emperor Jin Tai would deal with this. Perhaps today's wedding ceremony would no longer go smoothly. At the same time, what made everyone curious was where this strong person came from. Why had they never seen him before? How dare he come here to make trouble? Jin Tai remained calm, but the chief steward, Nia Shaoqian, was angry. She didn't expect that she had ordered people to let him in, but the other party did not appreciate it. Instead, he caused trouble in public. How could everyone in the immortal palace put their face? She immediately shouted, "Who are you? How dare you act wildly here?" By Changchun. The man in the green robe on the top of the Hua Biao replied lightly. His words echoed in this vast golden world. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately thought of the person who challenged the emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi. They all showed a look of realization. It turned out to be that crazy person. They heard that he was injured by the emperor of the underworld and fled into the forbidden area of the underworld. They didn't expect him to still be alive. However, since he dared to challenge the emperor of the underworld, it was not surprising that he dared to cause trouble for the immortal emperor. However, the timing was really good. It was actually during the immortal emperor's wedding. Jin Tai's eyebrows slightly moved. He opened his half-closed eyes and suddenly stared at the man in the green robe on the top of the Hua Biao. A person who could fight against Bai Qi without dying finally caught his attention. Nie Xiaoqian was startled. She didn't expect that the person who broke in was that madman. She coldly snorted and said, "You escaped from the hands of the emperor of the underworld, but you don't know how to cherish it. Today will be the day of your death. This old man has nothing to do in this world. Life and death are nothing to me. Don't be so long-winded." Bai Changchu no longer paid attention to Nie Xiaoqian. He faced Qin's threatening gaze and lightly asked, "I heard that you're the strongest expert in the immortal world, a supreme monarch. Now it seems that you really have the bearing of an emperor. Jin Tai. There is no need to send others to death. Do you dare to fight me?" As soon as these words came out, everyone was speechless. This madman challenged the emperor of the underworld last time. This time, he really came for the immortal emperor. Wang Qing, who was looking at the top of the Hua Biao, slowly closed his eyes. He sighed slightly in his heart. It was not because he felt sorry for Bai Changchun, but because he was ashamed of his hesitation. Ever since he was defeated by Jin Tai, the shadow of defeat had been left in his heart. This time, he came with the six-dragon snow-blue sword. However, after seeing the huge force of the immortal palace, he actually had the idea of waiting for the right moment to strike. This was completely different from the current Bai Changchun. Although he was defeated by the emperor of the underworld, there was no fear in his heart. He ignored life and death and brazenly challenged the immortal emperor Jin Tai. Just based on this point, he had already lost to the other party in terms of temperament. Chapter 1086. How dare you? How dare you? They were eager to show their loyalty but did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. A large group of people flew out from below, and in the blink of an eye, thousands of people jumped out. They were all frogs at the bottom of the well, thinking that they were the biggest nobodies in the immortal palace. Protecting the dignity of the immortal palace was secondary, and they wanted to take the opportunity to show their strength to their superiors. The sect leaders shook their heads secretly. Did they really think that the other party wouldn't dare to kill them in front of the immortal emperor? However, no one in the entire immortal palace, from Grand Elder Jin to the experts below, said anything to stop Bai Changchun. Obviously, they wanted these people to test Bai Changchun's strength. Seeing so many people rushing over recklessly, Bai Changchun was not a soft-hearted person. He immediately snorted coldly, "Grand Elder Jin. I overestimated you. You actually sent these ignorant pawns to their deaths." His green robe that was fluttering in the wind suddenly froze and slowly drooped down. His right hand, which was behind his back, was raised in front of his chest. His 5 fingers formed the shape of a flower, and a light ball the size of an egg spun rapidly. As the spinning light ball grew larger and larger, the thousands of golden-robed guards felt that something was wrong before they could make a move. They saw that with the light ball and Bai Changchun's palm as the center, the airflow between heaven and earth from all directions was rapidly gathering toward the light ball. These people in the air immediately felt as if they were in a hurricane, and they were forcibly sucked in by the strong airflow. In fact, not only them, even the immortal palace guards with shallow cultivation in the square below could not stand still. They felt as if they were about to be swept away by the airflow. At this time, a strange phenomenon appeared in the air. The thousands of people who were originally rushing to attack Bai Changchun had now changed their direction and were desperately flying away in the strong wind, trying to escape the strong suction of the strong wind. Their movements were abnormally strenuous and slow. What kind of spell was this? The experts all around stared at the light ball and Bai Changchun's hand that had become larger. Those who had seen Bai Changchun use the lost immortal finger looked worriedly at the people in the air who wanted to escape but could not do so after a long time. At this time, the originally solemn wedding ceremony became abnormally chaotic under the strong airflow. Nie Xiaoqian's expression changed slightly. If so many people from the immortal palace were to die at the wedding, how could the immortal palace bear it? One had to admit that those who were eager to show off had made the right bet. Although their lives were worthless to the immortal palace would not sit back and watch them get into trouble on such an occasion. Nie Xiaoqian glared at the 6 people standing below and shouted, "Where are the law enforcement team? Capture this madman alive or dead." Among the 6 commanders standing below, Gao, who was in charge of the law enforcement team of the Immortal Palace, quickly walked down a flight of stairs. He waved his hand and pointed at Bai Changchun, who was standing on the platform, and shouted with a solemn expression, "Law enforcement team. Kill without mercy." As soon as he gave the order, countless streams of light flashed from all directions. And Gao himself took the lead and charged toward Bai Changchun. "Good!" Bai Changchun shouted decisively. It was as if he had no interest in dealing with these small fries. They were the ones he was waiting for. The ball of light in his hand had already condensed to the size of a wash basin. He stood on the platform and spun rapidly with the ball of light, turning into a ball of clear shadow. He had also used all his hands, and his 10 fingers quickly interspersed with the wash basin-sized ball of light. In an instant, the surface of the golden pillar flower burst forth with an intense radiance. Countless finger-sized rays of light rapidly burst forth, and like a dense rain, they splashed in all directions. Almost at the same time as Bai Changchun made his move, Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. This old man might not even recognize his own family when he was angry. One of his wrists was still being held by Qingyang. He immediately shook his hand and anxiously transmitted his voice, "Run. It'll be too late if we're too late." The 2 of them had more or less developed some tacit understanding during this period of time. Qingyang could feel the fear in his heart and subconsciously chose to believe him. Without another word, she dragged him and fled with all her might. However, the speed at which the 2 of them fled was ultimately not as fast as the killing speed of the lost immortal finger. Otherwise, with Greycloud Xayan's cultivation, he would not have been unable to escape. An earth-shattering scream rang out from behind them. The 2 people who were running away turned around to look, and their faces were instantly filled with terror. They saw blood blooming in the sky like rain, and within the blood blossoms, there was a sharp light that was as short and sharp as bullets that had yet to fade. Seeing the dense rays of light rushing toward them, Yu Qianqiu cursed Bai Changchun in his heart. This was 2F** King ridiculous. He clearly knew that he was here, but he still attacked indiscriminately. It seemed like this old man knew that he had the ability to escape, so he only cared about killing to his heart's content. He didn't care about his disciples' feelings at all. However, the key point was that he didn't want to abandon Qingyang and escape alone. The 2 of them had interacted for a period of time, and he discovered that this woman was actually a warm person on the inside. She wasn't a bad person, and it would be a pity if she died for nothing. However, the time they had interacted with each other was not enough for him to trust her enough to bring her back to Utopia. Qingyang was clearly shocked by the destructive power of the lost immortal finger, but she rarely left the paradise immortal realm. In addition, she was dancing at the Celestial Emperor's wedding. Aside from dancing accessories, she didn't have anything else on her. Thus, she didn't have any treasures that could block the attack. Even at such a critical moment, she still didn't abandon the burden that was Yu Qianqiu. Instead, she did her best to drag Yu Qianqiu along with her. As the saying goes, good will always be rewarded. This scum, Yu Qianqiu, often did things that were one-track-minded. Yu Qianqiu, who couldn't think of a way to satisfy both sides, waved his hand and released an expanding golden light. He hugged Qingyang's soft waist tightly with one arm, and the golden umbrella that emitted a golden brilliance protected the two of them. Even so, the dense and sharp lights were like a series of cannons. The two of them were sent tumbling along with the umbrella, and the golden brilliance of the golden umbrella gradually dimmed. Qingyang was a little surprised that Yu Qianqiu actually had a golden umbrella in his hands. However, she didn't think too much of it and thought that it was a gift from the Celestial Emperor. At the same time, she could see that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too low and couldn't unleash the defensive power of the golden umbrella. She immediately stretched out a hand and grabbed the back of Yu Qianqiu's hand that was holding the handle of the umbrella. With her help, the golden brilliance of the golden umbrella exploded, and it immediately blocked the endless stream of sharp lights. It steadily protected the two of them as they escaped. The commander of the law enforcement squad, Gao, was the first to realize that something was wrong. When he sensed that the terrifying killer move was about to explode, he immediately roared, "Retreat! Retreat!" He immediately took out the golden umbrella and withstood the powerful attack at close range, then quickly retreated. However, the others were not so lucky. After all, the golden umbrella personally refined by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai was not given to just anyone. Under the explosive attack of the lost immortal finger, even someone with Zhangyan Xayan's cultivation couldn't escape, let alone the others. A tragic massacre immediately appeared in front of everyone's eyes. For a moment, miserable screams resounded in the sky. Among the large group of people who came to attack from the sky, only a few were able to escape in one piece. Almost all of them were turned into bloody sieves. This was only the first wave of people to suffer. The guards of the Immortal Palace, who were originally lined up in the square, were the most unlucky group of people. For a moment, there were wails and cries, and in an instant, blood flowed like a river. It was simply too horrible to look at. As the power of the lost immortal finger continued to spread, many of the palace masters on the 3,600 mountains of the Paradise of Bliss on both sides of the stairs were not spared. The 12 immortal monarchs sitting on the stairs were also startled. Together with several commanders, they almost simultaneously flashed to Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's carriage. They seemed to be protecting him, but no matter how one looked at it, it looked like they were seeking the Immortal Emperor's protection. The Immortal Emperor was indeed the Immortal Emperor. At the critical moment, he did not disappoint everyone. Jin Tai waved his hand and a pale golden wall of light quickly spread out to block the front. This position was originally a place that had received special attention from Bai Chongqun. The fierce rays that erupted from the lost immortal finger were far denser than in other places. Countless fierce lights poured down, striking the light golden wall of light and exploding. The result was like raindrops falling onto the surface of a lake. Although ripples were created, they were utterly unable to break through it, let alone injure the person hiding behind it. On the contrary, the nearly 1,000 sect masters sitting below were all really impressive. Almost every sect had a trump card that could save their lives at the critical moment. In an instant, all kinds of strange treasures were revealed. Under the indiscriminate attack of the lost immortal finger, not many of them died. They no longer cared about giving face to the Immortal Emperor. Saving their lives was their top priority. One by one, they scattered like birds and beasts, hurriedly fleeing far away to watch the show. However, there was a blue-robed man with a silver mask on his face who didn't flee. He sat there as steady as Mount Tai, and when the beams of light shot towards him, he touched the snow-blue ring on his left hand's index finger. After which, his hands moved like a phantom, and he used the powerful defensive power of the snow-blue ring to destroy the beams of light that shot towards him. Bai Changchun saw that the lost immortal finger attack had no effect, so he waved his hand and ejected the last small ball of light, directly hitting the mystic wave light wall that Kinta had cast. Boom! There was a loud explosion as the mystic wave light wall surged with huge waves, but it still didn't break. This was already within Bai Changchun's expectations. If an immortal emperor couldn't even block his lost immortal finger, then it would really be strange. On the contrary, it was Wang Qing, who was sitting as steady as a mountain, who attracted Bai Changchun's attention. There were mutilated corpses everywhere below. The huge square made of gold was full of potholes, collecting and storing the blood that was flowing everywhere. The magnificent immortal palace layout was completely destroyed. The densely packed living people could no longer be seen. Those who didn't die had already fled far away and didn't dare to come close. Chapter 1087. Slaughtering people like weeds. What a powerful killer move. Qin Yang, who was hiding in the golden umbrella in the distance, couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when she turned around. Her mind was filled with the scene of the explosion, the blinding light, and the miserable screams. Just thinking about the scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere made her scalp go numb. Then she looked back at Yu Qianqiu and asked curiously, "You told me to run before that person made his move. You seem to have known that there would be danger. Have you seen this killer move before?" Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging her soft waist, smiled bitterly. "Of course I have seen it before. I'm afraid no one in this world has seen it as many times as I have." Tu Tsangin Axayan was slaughtered like a dog under the lost immortal finger. With so many people crowded together like vegetables, under the indiscriminate attack of the lost immortal finger, it would be strange if blood did not flow like a river. "No, it's just a hunch," Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily, but his heart was filled with emotion. The power of the lost immortal finger had grown with the old man's cultivation, and its lethality had become stronger and stronger. Nie Shaoqian, the chief steward of internal affairs of the immortal palace, also withdrew her gaze from the two of them. Seeing that the two of them had escaped at such a critical moment, her tensed eyes clearly showed a sense of relief, and her attention returned to the scene. At this time, the entire golden world was filled with a strong smell of blood. Even Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, who was standing in front of the window of the Immortal Palace's pavilion, could not help but frown. Bai Qi looked at Jean Tai, who had suddenly stood up, and snorted coldly. He couldn't help but find it funny. If this guy did not like to put on airs like an emperor, he would not have lost so many of his men at once. What was the difference between this and letting others slaughter them? Immortal Crocodile Monarch, Ji Wu, and Lu Yanqing were all stunned. Although they knew that Bai Changchun was powerful, they did not expect that he would deal an unbearable blow to the entire immortal palace. Killing people like grass, he was indeed not a soft-hearted person. The two people in front silently exchanged glances and saw hope in each other's eyes. The two of them started to look around and finally locked their gazes on Yu Qianqiu. Right below the floating immortal palace, the nearly 10,000 sect masters from the various sects were all dumbfounded. They didn't expect that on such a day, a madman would come to the immortal palace and start a massacre in front of the immortal emperor. Too powerful. Kill! Jean Tai shouted. The paragons of the immortal world couldn't help but give the order. The entire vast golden world was suddenly filled with a murderous aura. Thousands of figures teleported from all directions almost without warning. They were the palace masters of the Paradise Immortal Realm who had luckily escaped from the sidewalks on both sides. They swarmed towards Bai Changchun like a swarm of bees. The entire square was instantly filled with loud rumbling sounds. All kinds of flowing lights interweaved and cut like a net. All kinds of treasures were launched at the same time, dazzling the onlookers. Everyone seemed to know that Bai Changchun needed time to prepare his lost immortal finger. This was no different from a sneak attack. 1,000 experts launched a sneak attack together, clearly not giving Bai Changchun a chance to cast his lost immortal finger. TSK. Jin Tai. Wait until I kill all your lackeys. Let's see how long you can hide. Bai Changchun, who was surrounded by 1,000 experts, let out an impassioned roar. The battle had almost reached its climax in an instant. The entire peak of Huabiao was surrounded by figures. Light and shadow intertwined. No matter how high the cultivation of the people outside was, they couldn't see the battle inside clearly. Loud sounds shook the entire immortal palace, and angry shouts resounded through the sky. People kept screaming as they were eliminated from the light and shadow. Those who fell to the ground either had their heads smashed, their chests punctured, or their entire bodies torn in half. There were even people who were constantly ejected from the battlefield who let loose thunderous roars of fury in the distance, and they revealed their true forms as immortal beasts. There were huge flying snakes, ferocious WIRMs, huge eagles with wings flapping, giant scorpions waving their pincers. Some flew in the sky, some swam in the water, some ran on the ground, and some dug into the ground. These fellows bared their fangs and ferocious faces revealed their true forms. They swayed their huge bodies and circled outside the fierce battle, looking for an opportunity to attack. These immortal beasts were tamed from young fierce beasts by the immortal palace for many years. It wasn't easy for them to reach their current cultivation. Most importantly, they were all immortal beasts that had reached the level of immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Seeing its comrades die one by one, a giant flood dragon with a pair of red eyes suddenly swung its huge tail. The huge tail covered in thick scales swept out, and with a boom sound, the huge Huabiao with a diameter of tens of meters collapsed with a loud rumble. As soon as the already scarred Huabiao fell to the ground, Bai Changchun suddenly shouted, "Evil beast, you're courting death." A green shadow shot directly from the surrounding crowd in the air. A giant eagle with wings flapping immediately swooped down. Its two sharp claws quickly clawed, causing the air to explode. The speed of the green shadow was even faster. Its figure flashed in the air and dodged. Its 10 fingers were like demonic claws, directly inserting into the giant eagle's claws that were covered in scales. Its arms grabbed the giant eagle's tree-like calf and twisted forcefully. Immediately, the crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. As soon as the giant eagle let out a deafening scream, the skinny figure in a green robe immediately slammed into its abdomen. At the same time, he waved his palm. The palm carried a gust of wind that was like a knife, directly cutting the giant eagle's belly open. In an instant, a rain of blood poured down. Although the figure wrapped in a green robe was skinny, it was full of explosive speed. Go! With a sonorous roar, he flipped through the air at an incredible speed and kicked out violently from under the hem of his green robe. He directly kicked the huge body of the giant eagle and knocked over several of his companions in the air. This series of movements was so fast that it was almost completed in the blink of an eye, dazzling everyone who was watching. When everyone reacted from his movements, they saw that at the same time he kicked, the figure was already standing on the head of a giant scorpion, forcibly breaking off the giant scorpion's 2 huge pincers. Holding a pincer in each hand, he waved the huge pincer in one hand to smash away the giant scorpion's poisonous stinger that was madly stabbing at the head of the giant scorpion, while the other hand threw out a huge pincer to smash the giant golden-haired sky-drilling mouse that was shooting over, causing its brain to burst open, and it fell to the ground with a wail. The 2 pieces of the pincer had penetrated the head of the giant scorpion that was covered with carapace and inserted into its head. Before the green figure had landed on the ground, he had already waved his hand repeatedly, directly chopping off the huge heads of two immortal beasts, and casually threw them away to smash away another two huge fellows that were attacking from below. Bai Changchun rushed out of the encirclement and made a clean and neat move. The surrounding ferocious beasts were so scared that they did not dare to come close. The others gasped when they saw this. In the immortal underworld and netherworld, it was rare to see a guy who was so strong in close combat with his physical body. Moreover, it was such a skinny old man who looked so weak. It should be known that the cultivation of these immortal beasts was at least at the early stage of the immortal emperor. Because they were all domesticated and loyal to the immortal emperor since they were young, Jin Tai could be said to have used the largest amount of resources and did not hesitate to create them. Seeing Bai Changchun fighting a group of immortal beasts with the cultivation of the immortal emperor with his physical body, and slaughtering them with ease under such a dense attack, no matter which immortal beast encountered him, it would die miserably, like a piece of paper. How could everyone not be shocked? Even Jin Tai's expression changed slightly. He, who was always calm and expressionless, actually had a somewhat pained expression on his face. Lu Yanqing, who was beside her, opened her red lips slightly, as if she was seeing the #1 expert in the human world who fought against the heavens and the earth. But this time, the battlefield had moved to the immortal world, and it was the immortal palace that ruled the immortal world, but he was still as strong as ever. Immortal Crocodile subconsciously touched his neck, a little fear in his eyes. He did not know what would happen if the skinny old man's palm hit his neck. In the distance, Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched. From Bai Changchun's movements, he could see the shadow of animal play, that heroic spirit that could reach the clouds. No matter how many enemies there were, he could predict the enemy's moves and kill without mercy. Bang, accompanied by the sound of bones shattering, Bai Changchun's knee had already knocked against the forehead of the giant flood dragon that was sweeping across the room. The giant dragon's skull was broken, and blood and brain matter spurted out. Immediately, it let out a miserable howl. Bai Changchun snorted coldly, his hands grabbing the two fangs of the giant dragon. At the same time, his knees and hands exerted force, directly breaking the upper jaw and half of the giant dragon's head. The giant dragon's head, which was bigger than a big round table, was directly broken and turned upside down. It was a cruel and bloody scene. His green robe was stained with blood, and his murderous aura soared to the sky. Bai Changchun suddenly turned around, accompanied by a sonorous snort, his eyes like lightning staring at the group of immortal beasts behind him. The group of immortal beasts was actually frightened and flew back, but when they saw the immortal emperor's expression, they immediately rushed down with a deafening roar. Although the giant dragon under Bai Changchun was dead, it was not stiff. Although its broken head was pressed to the ground by Bai Changchun and could not move, its long tail subconsciously attacked. Bai Changchun sprang up and swept his arm. His 5 claws were like hooks, and they directly inserted into the tail of the giant flood dragon. He grabbed the tailbone and shook it casually. The giant flood dragon's huge body shook like a wave. All the bones inside were suddenly dislocated, and it could never move again. Whoosh! The air swirled in all directions, and the giant dragon's body was like a whip that was swung away by Bai Changchun. Bang! Bang! A few immortal beasts were hit by the big meat whip and flew away. Bai Changchun stood on the ground, swinging the big whip left and right, until the giant dragon's huge body was broken into pieces, and the other immortal beasts did not dare to come close. Then, he casually threw his hand, and his whole body teleported away. Jin Tai's eyes suddenly stared at the other side. The green robe that changed color was fluttering in the wind, and everyone's eyes were fixed there. Bai Changchun's eyes also stared at Jin Tai, and he lightly said, "I originally thought that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the immortal palace, and there were experts that could fight against me, but they are all not worth mentioning. Under my hands, they are all like chickens and dogs. I really can't enjoy myself." His eyes swept across the people around Jin Tai, and he loudly shouted, Jin Tai has no guts, and is called an immortal emperor in vain. Who dares to fight against this old man? Chapter 1088. The sound spread to the entire Paradise Wonderland. Anyone could hear that these words were deliberately provoking Jin Tai, however, this was not the case. Bai Changchun's eyes always glanced at the blue-robed man with a silver mask on his face below the stairs. Although Bai Changchun didn't know him, he didn't know what was going on. He vaguely sensed that this person exuded a dangerous aura. In fact, it wasn't really detected, but Bai Changchun sensed it by intuition. Since he started practicing bird play, the instinct that was stronger than a beast had never been wrong, so it aroused his vigilance from the beginning. But the strange thing was that he couldn't sense the dangerous aura later. No matter how fierce the fight was, this person closed his eyes and sat there quietly like a dead tree or stagnant water. He should have entered a certain state. Being able to enter this state on this occasion made Bai Changchun even more vigilant. He had been trying to figure out the identity of this person. The others below had run away, but he was still sitting here indifferently. He didn't know if he was a trusted subordinate of the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Although Bai Changchun was belligerent and arrogant, he was definitely not a fool. Otherwise, he would have been killed before he could even make a name for himself in the human world. The path that he pursued was not equivalent to throwing away his life in vain. There was no meaning in that. If he knew that there was a person who could make him feel dangerous, and he didn't keep vigilance, once he was killed by a sneak attack, it was equivalent to dying stupidly. It had nothing to do with others. If it wasn't so, he wouldn't bother to fight with these small characters at all. He would have directly made a move on Jin Tai. Because of this, Bai Changchun provoked him. If this person was Jin Tai's subordinate, Jin Tai, who had been using the lives of his subordinates as a test, would let this person make a move at this time. He was like this, but he didn't know that Jin Tai was also worried about Wang Qing. Otherwise, how could he let Bai Changchun lose face in public like this? Was the face of an immortal emperor so worthless? It must be known that Jin Tai was not a reckless person who could rule the immortal world for so many years. A real reckless person would not be able to walk to the end. How could there be so much good luck between life and death? Wang Qing sitting here quietly alone made Jin Tai feel that something was wrong. He absolutely didn't believe that Wang Qing didn't leave until now to stay and be loyal to him. That was simply a big joke. He even suspected that Bai Changchun's arrival at this time was arranged with Wang Qing. How dare you! How dare you! The voices rose and fell. The 12 immortal monarchs exchanged glances with each other solemnly. The others were also ready to make a move. At this time, they had to make a move. Arrogant bastard. Jin Tai's sneer was equivalent to stopping his men from coming out. Not only did he not get angry because of Bai Changchun's words, but he also regained his calmness. He stared coldly at Wang Qing who was sitting below and pointed at him arrogantly, Wang Qing. As the sect master of the number 1 sect in the celestial world, Heartless Palace, you ought to teach this arrogant fellow a lesson lest he thinks that there is no one capable in the celestial world. Bai Changchun's eyes slightly flickered as he stared at Wang Qing. So this was the sect master of the number 1 sect in the celestial world, the Heartless Palace. He had heard of this person from Yu Qianzhou. The eyes under the silver mask still couldn't be closed. An indifferent voice came from under the mask, the immortal emperor is flattering Wang Qing. Wang Qing is just a defeated opponent of the immortal emperor. With the immortal emperor here, it is not Wang Qing's turn to show off. Moreover, the immortal emperor has many experts under him. With the 12 immortal monarchs, any one of them is stronger than Wang Qing. This was a euphemistic refusal. Nie Shaoqian immediately shouted, Wang Qing. You dare to disobey the immortal emperor's decree. Wang Qing sat there indifferently, completely ignoring her. Jean Tai's eyes narrowed slightly and his tone became heavier. Wang Qing. I order you to eliminate this arrogant bastard for the celestial world. Wang Qing is here to congratulate the immortal emperor's wedding. After the wedding, Wang Qing will return to the Heartless Palace. The other matters have nothing to do with me, the voice under the mask said lightly. The nearly 10,000 sect masters below the celestial palace were in an uproar. Wang Qing's words clearly showed that he was disobeying immortal Emperor Jean Tai's decree. This wedding was getting more and more chaotic. Inside the celestial palace, Emperor of Hell Bai Qi, who had his hands on the window, put his hands behind his back and began to re-examine the sect master of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, who had publicly disobeyed the immortal emperor's decree. Jean Tai was not angry. He only slightly nodded and said, "It seems that I am too merciful. After this, it is time for the order of the celestial world to be restored." Then, he looked at the figure on the platform and let out a mighty voice that shook the heaven and earth. Left and right protectors, immortal monarchs, listen to my order, kill this bastard immediately. A chorus of voices sounded. Before the 30 figures moved, they heard Bai Changchun's deep voice that shook the heaven and earth. There is righteousness in heaven and earth, righteousness, condense. He suddenly spread his arms, and the atmosphere between the heavens and the earth suddenly froze. Immediately, a brilliant heavenly might descended, and an invisible and majestic aura covered the sky and the earth, rushing over from all directions. He did not dare to underestimate the subordinates that immortal Emperor Jean Tai used. At the same time, after understanding Wang Qing's position, he did not want to waste any more time with Jean Tai's subordinates. He wanted to end the battle quickly and directly fight Jean Tai, so he immediately used the righteousness technique that could borrow the power of heaven and earth. It was on a completely different level from the condense formula that he usually used in a small area. One must know that he was dealing with so many masters at the same time. In an instant, the 12 immortal monarchs and the remaining 18 protectors were frozen in the air, and it was extremely difficult for them to move. Under the righteousness, the unusually pungent smell of blood was instantly swept away, and the river of blood on the ground quickly turned into smoke, dispersing in the blink of an eye along with the lingering clouds and mist. The blazing sun in the clear sky was like fire. Under the direct rays of the sun, the entire immortal palace shone even more brilliantly. The golden ground, which was full of potholes, was deforming at a visible speed. Under the heavy pressure, the golden railings and arches that were erected in the surroundings were like candles meeting fire, sinking rapidly as if they were melting. Wang Qing was still sitting in the same place, but the golden table where he sat was untouched, and even the wine and delicacies on the table were still in the same place. A pale golden ball of light quickly expanded from Jean Tai's body. With a wave of his golden sleeve, the ball of light wrapped around the 10 people in front of him and separated from him. He casually pushed the 10 people out of the range of the huge pressure, and directly flew into the main hall of the immortal palace. The 10 people who were sent away. Chief Majordomo Nia Shaoqian and the 6 commanders were in charge of everything inside and outside the immortal palace. They needed to contribute to the reconstruction of the post-war order. Ji Wu was his immortal empress, so these 8 people naturally needed to be protected. As for Yi Shuajuan and Lu Yanqing, they came along for the sake of his newlywed wife. Jean Tai glanced at Wang Qing, who made him hesitate, and suddenly seemed to think of something. He slowly looked back in the direction of the pavilion of the immortal palace, and suddenly snorted coldly. He waved his sleeves, and the sunken golden ground quickly swelled back to its original state. Even the golden railings and arches that had melted under the heavy pressure were uprooted from the ground again, looking brand new. The nearly 10,000 sect leaders who were watching the battle on the ground were all silent, and their eyes were wide open. Immortal Emperor Jean Tai finally made a move, and this scene was not easy to see. Jean Tai waved his golden sleeves in the void, and the 12 immortal monarchs and the 18 protectors immediately felt the heavy pressure decrease sharply. but the pressure of heaven and earth was endless, and after a slight decrease, it instantly pressed down again. However, when they saw Jean Tai make a move, their confidence soared. All of them shouted loudly, and the 30 people began to rotate together, trying to resist the pressure of heaven and earth, but it was very difficult. Jean Tai immediately understood the intention of his subordinates. If they did not break this powerful pressure of heaven and earth, even if they made a move, they would only be a hindrance. In addition, there was also Wang Qing, who was plotting against them, below, so he waved his golden sleeves to help. The 30 people were able to use their strength to activate their cultivation, and finally, they rotated faster and faster, bringing with them the pressure of heaven and earth. The tens of meters in diameter under Bai Changchun's feet quickly became twisted. Bai Changchun was slightly surprised. After a short exchange, he knew that Jean Tai's cultivation was indeed much higher than his. At the same time, these people's method of breaking the pressure was also correct. If they continued to rotate, the condensed pressure would be stirred into a vortex, and there would be no way to use the pressure of heaven and earth to restrict their movements. The Celestial Emperor had not even made a move yet. In the distance, Yu Qianqiu, who was watching the battle, suddenly became nervous. He had already let go of Qingyang's arm, and both of his palms were clenched with purple flames. If anything went wrong, he would communicate with the heaven and earth to summon endless heavenly lightning to help. If it really came to that, he could not care less about the old man's displeasure if he interfered. Qingyang immediately felt his abnormality, and she looked at him suspiciously, not knowing what he was so nervous about. The name of the Celestial Emperor is indeed not in vain. Bai Changchun's hands quickly formed a series of hand seals, and he shouted, "Jean Tai. I want to see if you can save their lives from this old man's power of the heaven's grand art." The green sleeves fluttered, and the pressure of heaven and earth suddenly became extremely strange and domineering. Even the rays of light from the blazing sun were strangely twisted, and it was as if the world had changed. The pressure of heaven and earth instantly broke free from their control. The expressions of the 30 people changed dramatically, and they were almost scared out of their wits. The terrifying power had penetrated their pores in an instant, and it was unstoppable. It invaded their 7 orifices and internal organs, and it tore them apart. Jean Tai's expression changed dramatically, and in the blink of an eye, miserable screams resounded in the sky. The 12 celestial monarchs and 18 protectors instantly exploded into 30 clouds of blood mist, and they were all killed by Bai Changchun with a single move. Wang Qing, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, was also unable to withstand the terrifying and strange power, and he had already teleported away. He stood at the highest point of the roof of the celestial palace, and his eyes under the silver mask looked down in bewilderment. The emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi, was also staring at Bai Changchun with narrowed eyes. Chapter 1089. No wonder you were able to escape from the netherworld Forbidden Land alive after being severely injured by Bai Qi. You actually managed to comprehend the restrictions of the netherworld Forbidden Land. Is this what you're relying on to be so arrogant? Jean Tai sneered. Unfortunately, its power is far inferior to the real restrictions of the Ghost World Forbidden Land. It can't do anything to me. It could be seen that he had also tried to break into the Ghost World Forbidden Land, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to see through the mysteries of the Ghost World Forbidden Land. An uncontrollable majestic aura suddenly erupted from Jean Tai's body, covering the sky and covering the earth. Everyone in the sky and on the ground instantly felt the terrifying aura that made their hearts palpitate. Jean Tai's entire body was instantly covered in a layer of golden light, like a dream or illusion, majestic and awe-inspiring, like a god descending to the mortal world. Everyone knew that Jean Tai was about to officially make his move, and all eyes were focused on the 2 people in a stalemate. Yu Qianqiu was especially worried. In the strangely distorted space of the heavens, Bai Changchun's green robe was abnormally twisting and rolling, like boiling water. However, every slight change involved the strange power in the distorted space. Bai Changchun stared at Jintai, not the slightest contempt. The golden table and chair in front of Jintai instantly sank into the stairs, and with a majestic aura, he flicked his sleeves and stepped in the void, step by step, towards Bai Changchun, who was standing on the twisted table like a fried dough twist. The golden light on his body forced open the nearly distorted space around him. Humph! Bai Changchun let out a cold snort and waved his palm. His green robe sleeves billowed like waves, and Kintara's footsteps paused for a moment. The 2-meter-thick golden clouds around his body were immediately thinned by the strange twisting and dividing force. You really have some skill. Kinta's gorgeous golden robe trembled slightly, and the 2-meter-thick golden mist quickly condensed into a transparent, close-fitting golden light, like a golden armor attached to his body. Once again, he stepped into the air and closed in on Bai Changchun, but the speed of his footsteps was obviously a lot slower. Seeing that the opponent was getting closer and closer, Bai Changchun slowly clapped his palms together in front of Jintai. The green robe on his skinny body immediately swelled up like crazy waves, as if it would fly away from his skinny body at any time. Jintai's slow steps immediately became difficult to advance even half an inch. Everyone held their breaths as they watched the two men's every move. Although there wasn't a stormy battle, everyone knew that this peaceful scene contained great power. Ordinary experts wouldn't even have the qualifications to intervene. Behind the stalemate was endless danger. A single mistake could lead to death. This was a battle between experts. Inside the window of the pavilion of the Celestial Palace, the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, silently observed the subtle changes of the two people who were in a stalemate. On the top of the roof, Wang Qing, dressed in a blue robe, stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The eyes under the silver mask began to gradually close again. It seemed that he didn't want to care about anything in the outside world anymore. Yu Qianzhou clenched his fists tightly and did not even blink. He was so nervous that he did not even dare to breathe. Time flew by bit by bit. The blazing sun was gradually setting in the west. Heaven and earth were quiet, without the slightest sound. Jintai, who couldn't advance even half a step, finally couldn't help but snort coldly. No wonder you dare to come and make trouble. Your methods are indeed extraordinary. Wait for me to break it with force. As soon as his voice fell, before the crowd could see how he attacked, they heard a loud boom sound. His arms shot out like cannons, and the whole celestial palace floating in the air trembled. The strangely distorted space was suddenly filled with a powerful burst of energy and expanded rapidly. Bai Changchun's face changed slightly. With his cultivation and the time he spent comprehending this way, it was impossible for him to control this huge force in an instant. The space set up by the all-heaven power dissolving technique immediately exploded in an uncontrollable disorder. Countless turbulence from the explosion cut through the air with a hissing sound, dissipating into nothingness in the blink of an eye. It was really broken by Jintai's forceful strength. At the same time when the all-heaven power dissolving technique was broken, the two men disappeared almost at the same time. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The golden-robed figure flashed, and Jintai's speed was obviously faster. His 5 fingers grabbed at Bai Changchun as fast as lightning, like an eagle catching a chick. With his cultivation, if Bai Changchun was caught by him, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. However, Bai Changchun's reaction was not slow. Jintai's claw grabbed nothing but a disappearing shadow. What made everyone dumbfounded was that at the same time that Kintara's claw appeared out of thin air, a green-robed shadow appeared behind him. The shadow had not yet completely appeared, but the shadow of a fist was like a collapsing mountain. Bang! It directly hit Kintara's back, hitting him solidly. Kintara immediately flew out violently. This sudden scene almost made everyone's jaws drop. The result was too different from what they had imagined. Jean Tai's cultivation and speed were obviously higher than Bai Changchun's. Why did it seem like he was going to be beaten by Bai Changchun? It didn't seem like something the superior Jean Tai would do. From the window of the pavilion of the Immortal Palace, Bai Qi, who saw Jean Tai being sent flying, couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. He had the mentality of watching a show. Why did Jean Tai suffer a loss? Perhaps only he, who had fought with Bai Changchun, knew the reason best. Bai Changchun's reaction could be said to be extremely fast. Often, before you made a move, he had a premonition of what you were going to do next. If it wasn't for his speed that was far beyond Bai Changchun's, it would be difficult for him to hurt him at that time. Although Bai Changchun's cultivation was not as good as Jean Tai's, the power of this punch was not small. Ah! Jean Tai was hit and let out a muffled groan. He himself suffered this punch inexplicably. He thought that he had been careless just now. Immediately, he disappeared into thin air again. In a flash, he teleported back and furiously slapped out a palm. It seemed that he couldn't wait to directly smash Bai Changchun into a meat patty. However, when he struck out with his palm, he discovered that he had struck another shadow. He immediately sensed that something was amiss. There was a loud bang behind his left ear almost at the same time, and he was once again sent flying in a daze. This time, he was not so lucky. He was far more embarrassed than last time. Not to mention that his left ear was kicked by Bai Changchun, the dignified golden crown on his head was directly sent flying away, clanking noises as it fell in the distance. Looking at the disheveled Jean Tai being kicked away, there was a sudden uproar. Could it be that Jean Tai's era in the immortal world was about to end? F***ck. In the distance, Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he burst out with a curse. This old fellow beat the immortal emperor in front of everyone. This time, he had gained a lot of face. Even if he lost in the end, it was worth it. Everyone was still in a daze. Bang! Bai Changchun roared and disappeared from everyone's line of sight. He began to take the initiative to attack. Because he was defeated by the underworld king Bai Qi before, it left a shadow in his heart. He was truly shocked by Bai Qi's super speed, so he was wary of the equally famous immortal emperor Jean Tai. However, after 2 successful attacks, Bai Changchun understood that Jean Tai's speed was far inferior to Bai Qi's. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been humiliated in front of everyone. He immediately decided to go all out. Bang, bang, bang! A series of explosions mixed with Jean Tai's shameful and angry shouts caused the entire floating immortal palace to violently shake. The golden and azure shadows were so fast that it left people speechless. The entire square was filled with the shadows of the two of them. The two of them crazily intertwined with each other as they furiously fought. For a moment, killing intent soared to the sky, and a whirlwind swept away the clouds. The powerful aura almost forced the people in the distance to close their eyes. Wherever the two of them fought, they destroyed everything. The vast golden plaza had already become a mess. Huge craters could be seen everywhere in the blink of an eye. Large gold decorations that were originally on the plaza were constantly being twisted and sent flying everywhere. The two of them broke through gold like it was a piece of paper. They had super destructive power. Not long after, everyone vaguely noticed something strange from the movements of the two. Every time the two of them fought, the golden figure would stagger again and again as if it was being punched, kicked, kneed, and elbowed by the azure figure. It was as if it was beaten to the point where it didn't even have the strength to fight back. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Was this really the aloof immortal emperor? The muscles on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched as he laughed foolishly. He almost applauded. He didn't expect this old man to be so tough. Hi! A roar resounded through the heaven and earth. The disheveled Jin Tai suddenly broke away from the battle and instantly distanced himself from Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun also violently retreated. One of the two of them floated on one end of the square while the other floated on the other end, staring at each other from a distance. Jin Tai's body flashed with a golden light and he turned back into the incomparably dignified immortal emperor. His eyes were about to split open as he stared at the distant Bai Changchun. After being beaten up by the opponent for a while, he regained his senses. After a moment of reflection, he discovered that he was really muddle-headed from anger. He clearly knew that the opponent was extremely strong in close combat, but he still gave up his advantage to fight in close combat. Wasn't this just seeking humiliation? In fact, this matter was the same no matter who it was. Those who were used to being high and mighty would naturally subconsciously want to fight back when they were suddenly punched and kicked in public. If they didn't suffer losses, they wouldn't reflect on their own mistakes. If they won, they would think that they were strong. Bai Changchun, on the other hand, felt that his hands, feet, elbows, and knees were faintly numb. He was inwardly shocked at Jin Tai's powerful physical defense. Most ordinary deity realm experts probably wouldn't be able to withstand so many heavy blows from him, right? After hitting Jin Tai several hundred times, he still didn't cause any serious injuries. There was no point in continuing to fight like this. He wouldn't be able to defeat Jin Tai even if he used up his cultivation. If he continued to fight like this, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Thus, he took the opportunity to stop. Good. 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 Jin Tai said good 3 times in a row. It could be said that he was so angry that he laughed. He floated in the air and opened his arms. With an imposing manner that seemed like he was embracing the heaven and earth, he said in a clear voice, "The sky of the immortal world is my sky. The land of the immortal world is my land. No one can take it away. This immortal palace is my world. In my world, anyone who dares to offend me will be punished." Chapter 1090. Boom. As soon as these words came out, the entire vast and magnificent immortal palace suddenly erupted with a golden light that shot into the sky. Above the firmament, a single stone set off 1,000 ripples. Waves of air surged angrily towards the surrounding sky like water in clouds. The majestic and unparalleled aura shook the heavens and the earth, giving off a domineering feeling that it could kill everything in the world. It was as if the sky had been pierced through in an instant. Those sect leaders who were originally standing at the edge of the immortal palace to watch the show from afar were all shocked. The domineering powers suddenly erupted in front of them, and it was too late to dodge. Almost all of them desperately pushed out their palms in an attempt to resist the majestic and unparalleled aura that was rapidly rushing towards them. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions rang out around the immortal palace, mixed with countless screams. Wan Bushing's beard and hair stood on end as he forcefully protected Wan Ling with his Gang Qi to withstand the unparalleled shockwave. In an instant, he was blown away. Longxing also protected Long Xiaojiu and was sent flying. The cultivation of these 2 sect leaders was considered good, but the others did not have such a good ending. Nearly half of the nearly 1,000 sect leaders were instantly killed by the shockwave, exploding into a mist of blood. Not even a complete bone could be found. Nearly half of the remaining people vomited a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Most of the others who were still in the air were more or less injured to varying degrees. It was unknown whether those sect leaders who were complacent because they were ranked within the top 1,000 and were able to attend the Immortal Palace could still be happy. As for those sect leaders who were sitting below to watch the show, they were secretly rejoicing. They deeply felt that in life, there were gains and losses, and they could not be forced at all. When an immortal emperor was enraged, blood would flow like a river. Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu looked at each other from afar with fear in their hearts. If it weren't for the protection of the sect leaders of the two sects, the two of them would have been dead by now. The two women were already a little afraid to continue watching the battle. The battle between these top-notch experts often involved a large number of people. It was really too terrifying. It was not something that people with shallow cultivation like them could get close to and watch the show. However, for someone at Wan Bushing's level, how could he miss such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Perhaps today's comprehension would be tomorrow's breakthrough, so he naturally had to continue watching. Moreover, the closer he got, the better it would be, because he would be able to see more clearly. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu was also in a daze. He was sent flying with the golden umbrella. Fortunately, the golden umbrella was controlled by Qin Yang, who had reached the early stage of the Immortal Emperor stage. Otherwise, even if he didn't die, he would be heavily injured. The golden light soared into the sky and quickly shrunk back to envelop the Immortal Palace. The entire vast Immortal Palace seemed to have been covered by a transparent glass bowl in an instant. As soon as the surrounding aura shrunk back, Yu Qianqiu couldn't wait to get closer to Qin Yang. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to see too far away. However, Qin Yang refused to let the two of them take the risk. The people inside the Immortal Palace didn't suffer any injuries. They only felt that the entire Immortal Palace and Jin Tai had become one. The air was filled with Jin Tai's unquestionable majestic aura. Jin Tai's every move affected everything in the Immortal Palace, as if he could decide the life and death of anyone in an instant. At this moment, the people inside the glass bowl finally understood Jin Tai's bold words. It was really like what he said. This Immortal Palace is my world. In my world, anyone who dares to offend will be punished. Wang Qing, who was standing at the top of the Immortal Palace, still had an indifferent look. Even after such a huge change, he still couldn't open his eyes under the silver mask. Behind the window of the pavilion, the barefooted emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi, looked at Jin Tai who was floating in the air. His eyes flashed, and then he stared at the motionless Bai Changchun with an expression that said, "Let's see if Bai Changchun can handle this or not." They could only feel the endless pressure from Jin Tai in their hearts, but they didn't know that Bai Changchun's entire body was enduring the endless pressure. The huge pressure made it hard for him to move, and he had to summon all of his cultivation to resist. Jin Tai waved his sleeves, and the golden plaza that was almost completely destroyed by the fierce battle was instantly restored to its original state. Then, he grabbed the air, and Bai Changchun, who was suffering under the heavy pressure, couldn't bear it anymore. With a pu sound, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood instantly turned into a red mist under the heavy pressure. His entire body was like a shooting star that was pulled over by Jin Tai. He didn't have the slightest ability to resist at all. "How dare you? You dare to blaspheme this lord, do you know your crime?" Jin Tai's majestic voice reverberated in the world. His grand golden robe with dragons coiling in the sea of clouds shined with a brilliant light. The majesty of an immortal emperor reappeared in the paradise wonderland. Bai Changchun, who felt as if he was carrying an iron mountain, slowly raised his head and said with great difficulty, "Ridiculous. How dare you? Under this lord's control, kneel and reply." Jin Tai waved his finger, and Bai Changchun's body fell to the ground with a whoosh sound. With a loud bang, the entire Immortal Palace slightly trembled. Bai Changchun's feet sank deep into the ground, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. However, he stubbornly resisted and didn't kneel. The spectators were secretly frightened. They didn't expect Immortal Emperor Jin Tai to be so powerful. Once he got serious, Bai Changchun, who seemed to be strong earlier, didn't even have the ability to resist. In the blink of an eye, Bai Changchun's life and death were in the hands of Jin Tai. The reason why Jin Tai didn't kill him. Everyone could see that Jean Tai obviously wanted to restore his lost face in front of everyone, and he wanted to restore the supreme majesty of an immortal emperor. At this time, Jean Tai had an aloof appearance as he looked down at the people below, and he indifferently said, "Can't you borrow the power of the heaven and earth to fight against this lord? In my world, don't even think about using the power of the heaven and earth. Quickly kneel down and apologize. Maybe this lord will let you go and grant you a quick death." Yu Qianzhou, who had finally convinced Qingyang to come closer, saw this scene, and his eyes widened in anger. He was about to summon his purple flames to attack Bai Changchun, but he saw two black and white yin-yang fishes coming out from Bai Changchun's body, and he couldn't help but be startled. "You alone cannot decide this old man's life and death." Bai Changchun coldly snorted. The yin-yang fishes that were circling around him slowly lifted him up, and he pulled his feet out from the ground and flew towards the sky. Jean Tai's expression slightly changed, and he finally stopped putting on the smelly airs of an immortal emperor. A giant golden hand suddenly appeared behind him, and without any hesitation, it directly grabbed forward. At this time, the yin-yang fishes suddenly turned into a black and white Tai Chi light ball, and Bai Changchun was protected within it. The giant golden hand grabbed both the ball and Lu Ming, and it seemed as if it wanted to directly crush them. One movement separates yin and yang, like a seal, don't move the universe. Bai Changchun's sonorous voice slowly flowed between heaven and earth, and within the sonorous voice was an unending gentleness. The yin-yang Tai Chi light ball immediately began to revolve freely, and it wrapped around Bai Changchun, who was moving in a strange and slow manner. The giant golden hand was unable to grab the ball of light, and it clenched into a giant fist, and began to wildly beat at the Tai Chi light ball. A series of rumbling sounds rang out, and although the movement and momentum seemed astonishing, in reality, it didn't affect Bai Changchun in the slightest. The ball of light was slippery, and no matter how powerful the fist was, the golden fist would always slide past the ball of light. Even if the fist hit the ball, it would feel as if its strength was lost, and it would be bounced back by a powerful elastic force. After a while, Jean Tai was a little angry. No matter how he attacked, no matter how much pressure he exerted, he couldn't do anything to the ball of light. In a fit of anger, he personally rushed over, punching, kicking, slashing, and grabbing. He almost pounced on it and bit it with his teeth. Inside the attic, Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, looked at Bai Changchun with a serious expression. He knew how powerful Jean Tai's power was, and it was several times stronger than his own. It was not easy to resist, but he didn't expect that Bai Changchun could so easily resolve it. His intuition told him that the ball of light might be some kind of treasure. Everyone looked at Bai Changchun, who didn't fight back, in surprise. Their eyes gradually became fanatical as they looked at the Tai Chi light ball. They were all trying to figure out what kind of treasure it was that could withstand such a heavy blow from immortal Emperor Jean Tai without any damage. It was undoubtedly a top-grade defensive treasure. If it fell into their hands, Jean Tai. Today's battle ends here. When this old man comes again in the future, I will break your golden world and erase your name as the immortal emperor. Bai Changchun suddenly shouted coldly. He didn't have the strength to deal with his opponent. In any case, he had already achieved his goal of turning Jean Tai's wedding into a funeral. There was no point in continuing to waste time, so he drove the Tai Chi light ball to leave this place. You still want to run after entering my world? It's not that easy. Jean Tai's face became ferocious. He flashed in front of the light ball that Bai Changchun was about to leave. So what if it's your world? Bai Changchun's expression was indifferent. Could it be that your destructive power is stronger than the heavenly enchantment? This old man treads on yin and yang, creating thousands of creations, and is as unmoving as the universe. What can you do to me? If this old man wants to leave, who can stop me? What a big tone. Jean Tai sneered and waved his hand. His 5 fingers formed into a claw and grabbed the ground. The entire floating immortal palace in the sky trembled, and a big bulge appeared on the ground made of gold, growing higher and higher. Suddenly, a staff overflowing with golden light broke out of the ground and directly fell into Jin Tai's hand. Bai Changchun looked at the staff in his opponent's hand and his pupils shrank. He slowly nodded and said, "It seems that this should be your special treasure." Jin Tai didn't say a word. His staff carried the sound of wind and thunder, breaking through the void. However, the result was no different from before. No matter how good his staff was, no matter how much power he exerted, it was difficult to hit the opponent. His staff always slid away. Even if he hit the opponent, the rebound force was greater. At this moment, he finally understood that the ball of light that was neither black nor white could not be destroyed by brute force. Seeing that he could not think of a way to stop the other party from escaping, he anxiously stared in the direction of the immortal palace, gritted his teeth, and shouted, "Bai Qi! If we don't get rid of this monster today, he will be a threat to us in the future. How long do you want to watch the show?" Chapter 1091. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Bai Qi? Which Bai Qi? Was the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi also here? Was the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi watching the show from the sidelines? Everyone thought about it again. The only person who could make the immortal Emperor Jin Tai call Bai Qi at this time was the mysterious Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi, who rarely showed his face in the outside world. Bai Changchun paused and suddenly turned his head. Everyone's eyes followed Jin Tai's gaze. At this moment, everyone realized that behind the latticework window of the attic, there seemed to be another white figure standing there. Suddenly, everyone's eyes moved slightly to the smooth golden wall next to the window. They saw a white hand with slender fingers cut through the golden wall like a knife cutting through tofu. Then, another hand came out. The two hands moved to the left and right, and the thick golden wall was pulled apart like a curtain of beads. The soft, mud-like opening appeared on the wall. Wang Qing, who was standing on the highest point of the roof of the celestial palace, suddenly opened his eyes under the silver mask. He was also startled by the movement below and looked down in disbelief. He didn't expect that someone was hiding under his feet. They were so close, but he didn't notice them. The other party's cultivation level was obviously higher than his. Was it really the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi? At the gap of the golden wall that was torn open, a barefooted scholar in white clothes floated in the air. Looking at the two people who were locked in a stalemate below, he shook his head slightly and smiled. Then, he walked out of the void step by step as if he was walking on water. This scholar in white clothes was the legendary Emperor of the Underworld. Everyone widened their eyes and sized him up. In reality, among the people present, not many had seen the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi. Suddenly seeing such an elegant and handsome scholar in white clothes, they were all a bit surprised. Was this person who looked like a weak scholar really the famous Emperor of the Underworld? It was really him. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Suddenly, he saw Bai Qi tilt his head and nod at him with a smile. It was a polite greeting. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched as he looked at Bai Changchun and Qin Tai. "He's the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. He's actually the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi." Wan Ling's face instantly turned pale as she looked at Bai Qi, who was walking in the air, and muttered to herself. Her thoughts instantly returned to the blue rippling pool in the desolate valley many years ago. The naked woman, in the immortal realm. "Not many people dare to do this to me. You have already done this to me, so you must take responsibility for me." The white-clothed scholar said, "Take responsibility for you? I don't think I've done anything excessive to you. It's just a hug and a kiss, yet you want me to take responsibility. You're making things too difficult for me." The naked woman said, "I don't care. I've never let another man see my body. You've seen it and touched it, so you have to be responsible for me, or I won't let you go. The white-clothed scholar said, what high-sounding sentiments, to actually threaten me. If you have the chance to find out who I am, you will naturally know that your request is too much. The naked woman yelled, stop. A man dares to take responsibility for his actions. If you have the ability, then tell me your name. The white-clothed scholar said, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear my name. It's better if you don't know. Seeing Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi appear, the shocked Wan Bushing suddenly heard his granddaughter murmur. He turned around and asked in a low voice, Ling, what's wrong? Do you know Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi? Wan Ling slowly turned her head and said with a miserable expression, he is the man I told you about. Bai Qi is the man you like. Wan Bushing looked like he had swallowed a fist-sized apple. His expression was far beyond shock. Grandpa. You once said that as long as it's a man Ling, truly likes, you will find a way to help Ling, get him. Even if he's a married man, you will still snatch him. Wan Ling knew that it was impossible, but she still held on to some hope. Wan Bushing almost choked to death. No wonder she was his precious granddaughter. She had such a good taste. She actually chose the Emperor of the Underworld. But was Bai Qi, the Emperor of the Underworld, someone you could get just because you wanted to? He couldn't help but sigh and shake his head with a bitter smile. Grandpa never dreamed that the person you met would be him. I'm afraid Grandpa will have to go back on his words this time. Grandpa is truly powerless. Ling, you should give up on this unrealistic idea. I also didn't expect him to be the Emperor of the Underworld. Wan Ling murmured with a bitter expression. The white-clothed scholar didn't walk very far in the air when he suddenly turned around to look at Wang Qing on the roof. He calmly said, Wang Qing. Standing too high isn't a good thing. There's a saying in the mortal world, the higher you stand, the more painful it will be if you fall. You better understand. Standing on the roof, Wang Qing remained unmoved. He only stared down and slowly replied, Thank you for your teachings, Emperor of the Underworld. Wang Qing will remember it. The white-clothed scholar didn't say anything else. He turned around and strode forward. His pace wasn't fast, but it was as if the ground had shrunk to an inch. In an instant, he arrived in front of the two people who were in a stalemate. Bai Qi looked at the person in the ball of light and said indifferently, Bai Changchun. We meet again. Obviously, he didn't have a good impression of this old fellow who came to his underworld royal palace to cause trouble for no reason. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Bai Changchun. The incident where Bai Changchun was severely wounded by the Emperor of the Underworld in just 3 moves shook the 3 realms. Now that he met the Emperor of the Underworld again, and with immortal Emperor Jin Tai watching from the side, wasn't Bai Changchun a dead man? Not to mention them, even Yu Qianqiu was extremely nervous. He didn't think that the old fellow had any chance of winning. After all, the old fellow couldn't even deal with Jin Tai, so how could he deal with both the immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld at the same time? Although he knew the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, and Bai Qi was very friendly to him, he didn't think that their relationship was good enough for Bai Qi to let go of his enemies who had come to the Underworld Royal Palace. Yu Qianqiu was already holding 2 balls of purple flames in his hands. Dark clouds as black as ink had appeared in the sky at some point and were rolling over to cover them. I was thinking of coming to the Underworld Royal Palace to ask for advice when I have the chance. I didn't expect that the Emperor of the Underworld was already here. Bai Changchun looked at the 2 people, and his spirit seemed to be ignited in an instant. He said with a strong desire to fight, It seems that the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor are determined to keep me here. It would be impolite for me to refuse. I will risk my life to keep you company. In the distance, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and thought, impolite my ass. How many lives do you have to give up? Didn't you say that no one could stop you if you wanted to leave? His brain was just normal for a while, and now he was acting up again. There was really no saving him. Everyone in the world was shocked by Bai Changchun's heroic words. This guy actually wanted to fight the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor at the same time. While sighing with emotion, they also felt that Bai Changchun was too brave. One Immortal Emperor was enough for him. Wang Qing, who was standing on the roof of the Immortal Palace, was also shocked by Bai Changchun's words. It seemed that something was stirred up in his body, and he couldn't suppress it even if he wanted to. He stared at Bai Changchun with cold eyes. Bai Qi snorted coldly and put down his hands. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Bai Changchun, as long as you submit to me, I can guarantee that you will be able to leave this place safe and sound." As soon as he said this, Jin Tai's eyes flashed strangely. At this moment, the sky gradually darkened. Everyone looked up and saw endless dark clouds covering the sky. It was as if a storm would come at any time, just like the situation at the scene. I will also say the same thing. Bai Changchun stared at Bai Qi with sharp eyes and said loudly, "If you want me to surrender, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall at your feet." As soon as he said this, the sky became dark. There was not a single ray of light in the sky. The entire Immortal Palace was shining brightly between heaven and earth. From the darkness to the light, people could see the situation inside the glass cover more clearly. Why waste your breath on this stubborn guy? Jin Tai didn't give Bai Qi another chance to reply. He stared at Bai Changchun with a ferocious look in his eyes and shouted, "Then I'll fulfill your wish." The golden cloud cudgel in his hand swept through the wind and thunder. Bai Changchun didn't expect that an immortal emperor would disregard his dignity as an immortal emperor and launch a sneak attack in front of so many people. Moreover, he did it when the Emperor of the Underworld and the Emperor of the Underworld were working together to deal with him. He didn't even dream that, as a result, he was hit by the golden cloud rod and was sent flying with a bang. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The Tai Chi light ball was almost destroyed in an instant. In the distance, Yu Qincho's blood was boiling and his eyes were about to pop out. How could the power of Jin Tai's sneak attack be weak? Fortunately, Bai Changchun's reaction was fast. The Tai Chi light ball quickly rotated to reduce the force, so he didn't suffer serious injuries. "Jin Tai! You despicable man!" Bai Changchun shouted angrily with blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. The world shook, and it seemed that even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. Rumble. The dark clouds in the sky began to brew countless lightning snakes. They were extremely angry and restless. Bai Qi glanced at Jin Tai, but he didn't care. It seemed that he was already used to this kind of behavior. Jin Tai quickly chased after Bai Changchun with the golden cloud rod. Every strike of the rod stirred up wind and thunder, but it no longer had the effect of a sneak attack. It was simply unable to do anything to Bai Changchun. "Bai Qi! What are you waiting for? Do you want to wait for him to destroy the Dark North Palace and take your head?" Jin Tai's angry roar resounded through the world. Bai Qi's eyes flashed, and he snorted coldly. Before Jin Tai could see where he was, a dense rain of fish shadows had already hit the Tai Chi light ball. The speed was frightening. Although the heavy punches couldn't break the Tai Chi light ball, because they were heavy, dense, and fast, they produced a miraculous friction, and actually slowed down the rotation of the Tai Chi light ball. Jin Tai's eyes lit up, and he shouted with joy, "Good. That's it." The golden cloud rod in his hand smashed the void on the opposite side of the countless heavy punches. Boom! The Tai Chi light ball almost collapsed. Jin Tai was overjoyed and swung his rod again. Inside the Tai Chi light ball, Bai Changchun shouted angrily, "Step on yin and yang, reverse the universe." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.